Let the truth so help you God. Have a seat. Please state and spell your name for the record.
Amanda Bruce, Amanda Bruce.
And what was your maiden name?
Ferris, Farris.
So you are the daughter of who?
Of my father, Gary Ferris, and Melody Farris.
So speak into the microphone.
Sorry.
We'll take our time. So Amanda, you are of the four children. Which are you? The oldest, the middle, the youngest?
I'm the youngest.
All right. About what year were you born?
1989.
All right. So you don't remember much of living. Do you remember at all living in Alabama?
I have images in my head of like our playroom, but no, I moved here in kindergarten.
All right. And that would have been to Alpharetta or Atlanta?
Yes, sir, Alpharetta.
All right. So kind of tell the jury a little bit about what it was like growing up in the Ferris household.
Honestly, when I was a child, everything was normal. Lived in a home in Alpharetta, which was normal, and we all went to school in kind of the same area.
Where'd y'all go to school?
I went to Chattahoochee High School. Brothers went to Milton, and then my sister also went to Chattahoochee as well.
Okay. So tell me about kind of everybody's, this jury has heard your siblings testify throughout this trial. So this is your kind of chance to explain what you saw growing up. You know, everybody's personality. Tell us how Chris was growing up.
Chris and I had the biggest age difference. He was 10 years older than I was, so I don't really recall a lot of interaction between him. He was just like the oldest brother. Moved out early. I must have been in middle school when he went to college. Scott, from our childhood when we lived in Alpharetta, like at Hampton Hall, he played football and he was a little bit more of an introvert. Chris was more of an extrovert. Emily, we were very close. We were 18 months apart, and so she was only a grade or two above me, and she was more introverted and I was a little bit more extroverted, but we were quite similar in ways.
Okay. So how was your parents' relationship back in those days?
Everything seemed about as normal. We didn't really take a lot of vacations or anything like that. We would go to the beach when my dad had a law seminar every once in a while, but looking back on it compared to what I do for my child, it was kind of just routine day in, day out things. Go to school, come home, clean house, wake up, do it all over again. So it was all very...
Did y'all have chores
normal.
Or how?
Oh, yes. We always had chores. Whether it be outside, inside, we had responsibilities, or at least I did.
Okay. So, the jury has heard quite a lot about, where everybody went in their life after they kind of graduated high school and the family began to grow up. So we'll start with you and then kind of tell me about your siblings.
Well, I graduated from high school and I went...
In 2008?
Correct, 2008, and immediately went down to Georgia Southern. Lived there for a couple of years, and then I actually moved back home, partially because I wasn't doing too well, and because my dad kind of wanted me to come home at that time. So
about what year would that have been?
2010. So I came back, and then I did some school at Georgia Perimeter College and finished up, got there, and kind of went into work at retail, and I found my love in retail. And
that would have been when you went to work for Tory Burch?
No, I actually worked for Victoria's Secret for a while, and then for an accounting firm. I was a server. I did a kind of, number of things, but eventually I found my dream job at Tory Burch, and they did a company restructure, and I didn't get to work there any longer because my my position at the company got eliminated. But then I worked at Club Monaco, which is a retail store at Lenox, and then I ended up having my son not too long after that. Well, I guess I worked in fine jewelry for a while too, for like 5 years, and then I had my son, and I had to get out of retail.
So it's safe to say, prior to you having your son, you've always worked.
Yes. Oh, yes.
Okay. So tell me about Emily.
Emily, she graduated high school. She went to the University of Alabama, did really well there. She's always been really smart. Always did really good in school. Graduated communications degree, I'm almost positive.
Okay.
And then that's when she met her husband, Chris Payne, and they ended up moving to Atlanta, lived here for a while, like in the Dunwoody area, and then I think he may have gotten a job up in Tennessee, and they got married up there, and that's, I guess, where they've been ever since.
All right. And then tell me about Chris.
Chris went to University of Alabama for a couple of years, maybe 3, I'm not sure. Did not finish, and then I really don't know how long after that he met Kimberly, and they ended up pregnant with Ella, and they got married, moved up to Maine, had Addison, and then Chris came back after they got divorced, or during the divorce, something like that. But he moved back here, and he's been back here ever since.
Okay. How about Scott?
Scott graduated high school. Kind of worked odd jobs, I guess you would say, kind of like I did. And he worked at Jiffy Lube, he worked at car dealerships, he just kind of worked all over the place, honestly. And then he decided that he wanted to go into the Army, so he did that. I want to say, I know I spoke to him over the telephone, or not over the phone, but over chat, my freshman year of college. And he was not in there for very long. And next thing I knew, I did go out and visit him at the base in Texas for a little while. And when he had his girlfriend, Gina, who I later found out, I guess they were married. And then he came back here, from what I can recall.
Okay. So this phrase has been used, and it may be you that I heard it from originally, I can't remember. But would it be fair to call your family the Ferris wheel?
Unfortunately.
Okay. Well, let's kind of get into that, if we could, and kind of talk about, from your perspective, the personalities in the family and kind of the interplay of the siblings and the parents, and through the years how that kind of developed into 2018.
I wouldn't say that term really came along until we were adults. We were not in college or anything. I guess you could say we were in college, but there's always something going on.
Well, kind of give the jury a background of that, if you don't mind.
Chris, him and Kimberly got pregnant. They got married. They had their issues with their divorce, unfortunately. Scott going to the Army, getting out. He kind of just lived at home. He really didn't do much. Really kind of worked odd jobs all the time. I know he was working at the Nissan dealership when I got my car, and that would have my first and second car came from that same dealership, but I guess it was the first time. So that was a senior in high school. He was working there. Sorry, I lost my train of thought.
Okay, well, let me do this. Let's kind of work through personalities in this Ferris wheel. So let's start with Chris. What would you say Chris's personality is? And then give me some examples.
He was very extroverted. He was always the center of attention at, I could say, at parties and things like that. But him and I, we were friendly. We were all friendly. We all got along. We all went to Christmas together, and we all were friends, I guess you would say, but we didn't know the inner workings of each other's lives. I don't know if I'm just kind of one of those people that likes to stay out of it, but there was just something always kind of going on. Everybody had their problems, but my sister, she had her things, and her husband was in and out of trouble, but Emily never did anything wrong. I think she is a great wife and a great woman. Scott, he just lived at home. Him and I really didn't get along. He was kind of aggressive towards me at times, but other times we were fine with each other. He was kind of a different character, but he was our brother.
What do you mean by that?
He was just very introverted. He didn't have a lot of friends. don't know how to explain it. He just wasn't very much like us. But he just lived his own life, and we weren't involved with him. But we weren't involved with each other very much at all either. So it's like, it was what was it on the outside. It wasn't, we didn't really connect internally. So,
Okay.
I don't know.
And then how would you assess your personality?
I like to think I'm a loyal person. I'm a caring person. I always like to believe the best in people. I almost and I don't want to say a fault, because I think everybody deserves a friend in this world, but I can be very introverted at times. But I like to have who my friends are. I passionately love them, and I would be there for them. But I like to consider myself kind of where I stand in the middle, where I like to evaluate everything from the outside. But I like to stay out of a lot of drama.
Okay. So we keep kind of touching around the outsides of the drama, but would you say on a scale of 1 to 10 that your family pre-2018 was 1 being very boring, not dramatic, 10 being as dramatic as it gets? What number would you give it?
It's hard to say, because that was our normal. I think there was always something going on in everybody's life. I tried to, all of this, I was just trying to get married and fall in love with the man that I wanted to marry. And my world got turned upside down. And I was just very much one of those, like, everybody else's problems are their own and I can't fix it. But it was tough. It's really hard to explain, but everybody had trauma and trouble and issues.
You use the past tense when you're talking about your siblings. Why is that?
We don't talk anymore.
They don't talk to you.
Communication is a two-way street.
So when's the last time you talked to your siblings?
Had to be probably end of 2019.
Okay. And why do you believe that is?
This had something to do with it, but we had our own falling outs individually that I kind of refreshed my memory when I knew this was all happening, and reading through text messages and things like that. But Chris and I had a falling out a year prior. My husband and I always go to Lake Lanier Islands for the 4th of July. My husband grew up in that area and worked there for a very long time.
At Lake Lanier Islands?
At Lake Lanier Islands. So that was our tradition. We did it every year, ever since I knew him.
This would be the big beach at Lake Lanier?
Yeah, like what's now Margaritaville.
Okay. And we're going to talk about the 4th in 2018 in a minute.
This is
This is what you guys did every year.
Yeah, but I'm talking about 2017.
Okay.
So we invited Chris and Jenna and the girls to come up with us to celebrate the 4th of July. And it ended up where we had spent the entire day out there, and they were drinking heavily. And we went to the Mexican restaurant on Friendship Road, and I pulled the girls in the bathroom, and I was like, listen, I can't let you drive with them. I was like, it's not safe. So they agreed, and we got in the car and we took them back, as they were staying at Lake Lanier Islands Resort that night, and took them back. And shortly after that, I called my parents. Not that night, could have been a couple of days, I don't remember. But I told them, I said, Chris has a problem. He has a drinking problem, and those girls are going to get in an accident, and something bad's going to happen to them or somebody else. Well, it wasn't too long after that my brother decided to call my parents, and specifically my father, and say that he was having an affair with my mother, and accused. And that was pretty much from then on out. I'd never felt the same about Chris.
And so that was right around the 4th of July 2017.
Correct.
Was this also the time were you aware of him threatening to kill your mother?
That happened after.
Okay.
I kind of pieced it all together because I hear bits from people but nobody tells me directly. Honestly, when that happened, I didn't ask questions. I didn't want to be involved. I thought that was something that my parents should handle. They were the parents, they needed to handle it, and that's why I went to them about his problem, and because it wasn't my place to tell him he had a problem, and it was theirs as his parents. And I don't know if that was a result of that.
Did you know that it had almost a similar situation about Chris trying to leave with the girls, intoxicated? Did you know about that? I slightly recall something of the sorts. I just remember telling my parents that the girls should not be driving with them if they were going to be drinking like that. And if it came to the point of me saying something to my parents, there was a reason. I did not feel like they were safe. And so let's be clear. At that point, Chris, instead of stopping drinking or taking accountability for his actions, he decided to say that your fiance was having an affair with your mother.
That's what I can assume.
Okay.
Because there's no other reason for him. My husband was good friends with Scott and Chris before this. They went to an SEC football championship game together. Chad and my dad had a fantastic relationship before all of this happened. We went out there almost every weekend to have dinner with them. And we were there on his birthday on June 27th before he died. And we were the only ones there.
And we are gonna talk about that weekend. So I want to back up too. So that's you brought up Chris and you brought up that incident, and we may just have to talk about moments in time that come back, because I understand that what you're currently going through in this moment is awful.
Yes.
And this is a very patient jury, and so we will get through it. Okay.
Okay.
But let's go back and let's talk about Scott. I want to talk about, he gets back from Iraq. Can you tell me about any specific instances you remember? You mentioned anger and things like that. Can you talk about that for the jury?
He was just very protective over the farm, and I never understood why we called it a farm. So it was a glorified petting zoo at most, but sorry.
They know. They've seen it.
Sorry, we had a lot of animals growing up, and this was like that on steroids. It made no sense.
Well, then how did we wind up there? How did the family get to the farm?
That would be a great question. Ask my daddy. Because I don't know. There was a lot of things that happened before that moment that I think should have been taken care of before just putting money on it to fix it.
Okay.
I think a lot of things that have happened in our family get swept under the rug, and they're never addressed, and they're not taken seriously. But a sin is a sin, and I feel like this is a repercussion of all the sins that were committed over years, unfortunately.
This is sins by everybody in the
Everybody.
family?
False money idols. It was always what it looked like on the outside. It never mattered what it was on the inside. There was many things growing up, like our parents didn't really, they cared, but you had to figure it out for yourself. It wasn't, let me walk you through this, let me show you how to do this. I don't feel like it was ever that moment. So we kind of had to fend for ourselves a little bit in that aspect.
Well, let's talk. Let's just go ahead and get into it. Let's talk about your mother. Let's talk about it. Growing up. It seems like, the jury's seen messages between you guys. It seemed like you guys were pretty close.
She was my mom, yeah.
All right.
She is my mom.
Right.
I've always cherished we had a great family growing up. It seemed like everything was normal. We lived in a great house, and Alfreda went to a good school, had never wanted for anything, or never needed for anything, I guess I should say. We were given everything. My dad provided everything.
Let's talk about your dad, and I'm bouncing now too. What was your dad like?
He was great.
Take your time. I feel like we've been in this trial for a while.
He was a very smart man. I'm sorry. There was no doubt in my mind he loved all of us. He made that known, and he was very sarcastic.
Lawyers are notorious for that.
He had the lawyer personality for sure, but I mean, he was the dad that you walk down the stairs and he'd whistle and go, "You're a movie star." Or when Emily had her baby, he texted me a picture of me holding Olivia, and he goes, "You're natural." Like, he was just so loving, and I can still...
Take your time.
He was just such a big man, and he'd come and he'd just wrap his arms around you. But then in the sense, he'd turn around and fart on you, and you'd just be like, like, he was sweet, and but he was witty. He could say things that cut you to the bone. He definitely demanded respect in that aspect, I guess you would say. I was always fearful of him in the sense that I wanted to respect him and I wanted him to be proud of me. And when he would make comments that I was not doing as well as I should, I took that to heart, and I really wanted to make him proud. He was a good dad, he was a good grandfather, and I wish my son could have seen that.
Could you tell the jury what his relationship was like with Chris, for example?
I mean, I never saw them really do much together, I guess you would say, but I mean, Chris was grown. I don't know much about their relationship when they were younger. I don't really recall. I know that they were in a lot of fights over the past years about money.
Could you explain that to the jury? Best you can remember.
The best I can remember. I mean, it sounds awful, but I mean, he had issues with taking money, and he always had his hand out, but I don't doubt that he didn't love my daddy. I approach things differently than my siblings did.
What does that mean?
Meaning I never wanted anything in return for his love. Especially right before he died, I just wanted a mother and a father, and that was it. I didn't want any more of the drama. I didn't want any more of their marital problems. I didn't want to deal with any of it. I just wanted a mom and a dad, and I wanted to get married, and I wanted them to watch my kids grow up.
Okay. So, tell me if I'm wrong, but what I think I heard in regards to Chris was he didn't have a very close relationship with your dad that you noticed.
That I noticed. I mean, it was all about the same. I mean, they'd have conversations at Christmas, but I don't know if he ever went out and like had dinner with him. I don't know. I don't know. I didn't see it. They may have, but like my dad and I would meet up, and because I lived in Roswell, Buckhead area, and he would call me and he'd be like, "Hey, I'm leaving the office. You want to go meet at Cheesecake Factory?" And I'd say, "Yeah, let's go." And it would be just him and I. And so I don't know if they had that or not. I really don't.
Know. But you did know. And how did you know that he was stealing money from your dad?
Well, my mother made it very apparent. There was never any dirty laundry that the both of them weren't willing to air out to all of their children.
So
there was
your
no
dad
boundary.
Would do that too.
Yeah.
So he would say, "Chris is stealing from me."
Correct.
Okay. And was that in the months and weeks leading up to his death?
Years.
For years?
It's been a problem for as long as as the girls have been around, as far as I'm concerned.
How would your brother do it? You say steal from him. How would that happen?
It was all things that I was told, whether it be my mom, mostly my mom, because I don't think my dad really liked to talk about those problems. He liked to complain to me about my mother. But I mean, it was well known that he would take checks and he would cash them. He would take credit card numbers and he would use the numbers off of them. Just always needing stuff for the girls. always had his hand out. I don't know how else to say it.
But Emily didn't do stuff like that, right?
She needed help from him. I think it was mostly for her husband. I know that she moved into her house in Thompson Station, and she would have not gotten that without him. He co-signed on an apartment in Atlanta because they couldn't get that on their own. But my dad co-signed for many things. Like, he co-signed on my second car. He didn't pay anything for it, but he co-signed on it. So
he was just helping out the kids in that regard.
You had to ask for it, but he was not just going to willingly give it out. But you definitely had to ask for it.
Okay. Well, speaking of asking for it, were you familiar in any way of how Scott would be paid or how he worked on the farm? Do you know anything about that?
They moved out there, and when I never really understood why they bought the house.
Did you ever hear, I'll maybe stop you to ask this question, did you ever hear that it was going to be kind of your mom and your dad's fresh start? Did you ever hear that?
That's what I assumed it had to have been, because we had a come to Jesus meeting about it, and we both knew. I said, you know what this is, you know who she is, you know who you are. I need you to make a decision. I was in a relationship with a loser for quite some time, and they both came down and got me out of that relationship, and him and I were at Tacos and Tequilas in Buckhead, and I said, Daddy, if this is the hard decision I had to make, you need to make that decision too. You need to be happy. I mean, I would text them when they would say, oh, Daddy, or Mama would send me something, a screenshot, or being mad with Daddy, and I'd be like, y'all need to figure this out. Like, y'all are gonna have a heart attack one day. Or like Daddy would complain about something, and I'd be like, y'all need to figure it out. This is not my problem. It's just, I thought of that Purcell house as they both knew what they were getting into. And at that point, my hands were off of it. I said, that's y'all's problem.
Okay. So tell me if I'm wrong, because I'm just going off the way you just said this. But it sounds like your parents, this is just how they were.
Yes.
And when I say the way they were, the kind of the way that they would just kind of bicker and complain about each other, that was just the two-way street, and that's what they did. That's how they communicated.
Yes. And that's what they both accepted and wanted to do.
That's what they wanted to do.
Yes.
That was
my
their
dad
norm.
told me, he said, I love her, and I'm not leaving her. So that was his choice, not mine. He knew my opinion.
Okay. But though strange maybe to the outside world, to them,
that was their choice.
that was life.
They were both adults. They knew exactly what they were doing.
So back to Scott, and how did it come to pass that he wound up on the farm that you knew of?
Because he couldn't make it on his own. It was kind of a running joke that he just was always going to, he'd complain that, oh, Mama told me to do this, or Daddy told me to do that. And I'm like, well, move out. Like, it's as simple as that. Like, don't live with your parents. They always said, oh, I'm going to work on the farm, or I'd work on the farm, and things like, yeah, he did. I mean, I guess, but so did my dad, so did my mom. It was a kid that was living at home. And that was about it.
Do you think he was taking advantage of them?
I think anybody who asks their parents for money over the age of 20, 25 are taking advantage of people. Okay. I think it's a moment in a person's life where you have to say, I'm an adult, I need to grow up.
Okay. Do you did you know about kind of his daily life, about him just playing golf and not really actually working on the farm very much?
It was off of what I was told.
Okay. Nothing you saw?
No. I mean, he was out there, when I went out to visit my parents, you couldn't go on the property without him he'd come up right in it immediately, but like, he would see what was going on, and then he would leave, and he would go back. Like Christmas, or even dinners on weekends when we would go, he would come in, make his plate, and he'd go back to his little apartment. And that was like the most we saw of him. And
like, he would take the plate and go back to the barn apartment?
Yeah. He never
wouldn't sit with the family? No.
Occasionally he would sit at the bar stool, like in the kitchen, but.
And this is Scott, not your dad?
Correct.
Okay. If you had to say which kids were closest to which parent?
I mean, my dad and Emily always had a really good relationship, but she lived in Tennessee, so that's kind of hard to judge.
Sure.
My husband is a really big advocate of family, and looking back on it, I didn't have that lovey-dovey family relationship that everybody grew up with. And I wanted to cultivate that, and I made an effort to spend that time with my parents. So we would go out there almost every weekend and have dinner with them. And I mean, I was looking back through our text messages, and it felt like every weekend, baby girl, when am I going to get to see you? I'll be up there this weekend. So I really tried to get as close as I possibly could, but my dad was really hard to get close to. He was very shut off to a certain point. But I think he did that because we were his kids. I think it was different for the other people.
Like what other people? Would it have been different?
Like my husband would have conversations with him. They would have great conversations from what I heard. Like when we went over there for dinners, they'd go outside. My dad smoked cigarettes. Chad vaped at the time. They'd go outside and they would just chit chat. And they had great conversations. More than I could get out of him, I guess I should say.
Okay. So I want to start kind of moving into events in y'all's family life that would have been part of maybe the Ferris wheel, and get your version of the events to tell the jury. About the time you were in college, can you tell the jury about Ted Wiley? What you know about that?
Well, going back to my senior year of high school, my mother's mother, had open heart surgery, and she had to go up there and stay with her all the time. And my father would text me and tell my other siblings about Ted, and it was a speculation at first, and then it came to a point where my father would send me pictures of things that were not appropriate, that were possibly sent to my mother's phone. And at that point, I told him I didn't want to be involved and I didn't want to know. I felt like I was a child at that point and I didn't need to be involved, and I was very upset. So it ended up that it turned out really bad, and she went up there and was, I guess, I don't know if she was staying with him, I didn't ask. But my dad was at home and he was alone, and I was at Georgia Southern and I wasn't doing well anyways, and I said, I'm going to come home and I'm going to live with my dad. And I did. I came home and I lived, and it was not long after that that my mom came in and she decided to come back home. And at that time, I didn't want to be there. I didn't want to be involved. So I was dating a guy at the time. He had an apartment and I went and lived with him. One of the worst decisions I've ever made.
This was that loser you were telling us
That was
about.
that loser.
Okay. And so that's what you remember from that era?
From that era, yes.
But your dad knew about it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he was...
And everybody else in the family?
Everybody knew about it.
Okay. And would you just, kind of earlier you said about kind of the bickering and the way that they would communicate, that just became part of everybody's life.
Yeah.
Would you give that same assessment to any extramarital relationships both your parents would have?
I didn't know of any extramarital affairs that my father had.
Okay. But even your mom, as far as how it just became accepted by the family, and this was, though odd, this is how we live.
It was accepted because my father accepted it. I just made a comment that was not the best about my mother to my father, and he got very mad at me. He said I was not to speak to her about her like that. And after that, I didn't talk to him about it, and I stayed out of it. And that's where I left it. It was his choice. So that was it. That was their normal. They accepted it. They knew what they were doing.
Okay. What about the other siblings? Did y'all talk about it at all?
Oh yeah, we talked about it. They had far more anger for my mother, which I felt like I should have had, just because I feel like there were moments of manipulation in the sense of like I'd go up to Alabama with her, and I think that she would kind of use me as like, oh, I'm going up with Amanda, and then I'd be left at home, or I don't know. It's all speculation. All I can do is assume. But I don't feel like things were not going the way that they should have. And I think sins were committed in that I think both of them needed to address. And they didn't. They refused to.
Okay. So, kind of moving back closer in time, is it fair to say that Scott and your mother were actually pretty close?
Oh, they spent almost every day together. They would go up to what is called, I think, Scottsdale Farms. Scott loved to decorate. He was always doing something, whether it be outside or inside the barn, or they were always together. They always went up to Cherokee Ranch. I mean, all of us did everything with my mom.
What does that mean?
We all had a relationship with her. And Chris took his girls to be with her all the time. I don't know if they necessarily I guess they did stuff together. I didn't see where they did.
Did you know that the girls basically, when Chris would get them from Maine, they would spend the vast majority of their time
they came over to my mother's.
And they would call her Grandma. Did you know that?
Yes.
Okay.
They spent all their time with my mother. She was great-grandmother.
Okay.
His great-grandmother.
And she keeps your son, correct?
She did.
Okay. Okay. So they were close. Did they ever fight? Any altercations?
I'm sure.
Well, what you would have known.
I think they would fight when my mother would call them out on their stuff, and they didn't like it. And I'm sure that they felt the same way about her. But I mean, there was always an underlying anger that never went away. I think we all knew what was there, and the betray and the mistrust there that never went away. But we did as Daddy did, and we just swept it under the rug, and we just kept moving. We just kept our family.
Okay. So let's move to 2018.
Okay.
Do you remember any of your dad's medical spells? They would call them episodes.
Yeah, I mean, he said he would get sick and he would have to lie down, whether it be for 24 or 48 hours. I don't know. He would tell me he didn't feel well, and I'd beg him to go to the hospital. I mean, you've got to figure this out. I mean, he was not the healthiest man. But he refused. I remember trying to get him off of cigarettes. I tried to get him to, I was like, at least vape. I know it's still terrible, but it's not cigarettes. And refused and stuck in his ways and drank Mountain Dews. But he refused to do anything about it, ever. And then the one that sticks out to me the most in 2018, it had to be a few months before he died, because we were supposed to go to our wedding venue, and he got really sick, and my mom had called me the night before and said that he was going into a diabetic shock or something, but it was something was wrong with him. And Scott was there. They were trying to get him to the hospital, and I didn't see him until the next day, but I walked in and he was perfectly fine, just sitting up. So it was a shock. I mean, even Chris brought him a Mountain Dew in the hospital. And
Not even a Diet Mountain Dew?
No.
Okay.
And I remember sitting there, and it was like, Daddy, I won't go to this wedding venue if you don't want me to. And he's like, no, baby girl, go. He was always, baby girl, go ahead and do it. Because I always asked his permission for everything. I was like, are you sure it's okay that I go with Mama to go tour this venue? And he said, yes, please go. And same venue, we ended up putting a deposit down, and we never got married there. So yeah, he was not in good health.
So I want to move into the summer of 2018. And so in that summer, you guys would pretty much go up there and have dinners every weekend.
Every weekend, almost, yeah.
And your now stepdaughter, Cameron, she'd go too.
Yeah, if she was with us, yes.
Okay. The jury would have they met Cameron. And everything, how did it seem when you went that summer? Just normal?
Fine, it was just us there. Scott maybe come in once and leave, but Chris wasn't there unless the girls were there. Emily was in Tennessee, so she was never there. So it was just the four of us. 5 if Cameron went. My mom would cook, and we'd all eat dinner and stay till about 9, 10, and then go home.
So you tell the jury about the weekend before his birthday, from everything you can remember about that.
Well,
just that weekend. Who was there? What was going on?
The Saturday before, we had a big gathering in the house, and everybody was there. Chris, Scott, Emily, Chris Payne, Olivia, me, Chad. I don't think Cameron was there. She wouldn't have been there. And we just had dinner, and my mama cooked, and we had cake, and that was it. And we went home, and then Sunday.
Well, I'll ask you this. I mean, did everything seem normal?
Yeah. Our normal, yeah. Okay. Everybody gets along. We had a great time.
Okay. All right, go ahead.
Sunday, the next morning, we woke up and we went to go eat brunch. I don't know what time. Could have been near lunch time. We walked into Jay Christopher's over there, I think closer to their house. Emily was supposed to go back to Tennessee. I was asking to see if she would go with me and Daddy and my mom to go to a wedding store in Roswell to go look at dresses, and we ended up not going. And because she had to go back, and we had breakfast. It was just a normal breakfast. I don't know. And then my dad's birthday would have been in the middle of the week, I guess it was. It was a weekday. And we invited everybody. I didn't invite my mom because I thought my dad wouldn't like it. Boy, was I wrong. He was very upset that I did not invite her.
Well, what day was that?
I don't remember. June 27th.
Okay.
I don't know.
So the week before?
Yeah.
Okay.
So Chris texted at last minute, said he couldn't come. He said he was busy or something and he couldn't go. Scott didn't go. He was up there at the house, I guess, but he didn't go. So Chad and I had dinner with him at I can't remember the name of it, a Cajun place in Roswell Road, I believe. And that was his last birthday.
Okay. So let's move on into July the 3rd, 4th, and 5th. Things you saw and any interactions you had with your mother and Scott or anybody in the family at that time. So let's go to, did you talk to your mom at all on the 3rd that you can remember?
I can recall because I went through text messages. I'd worked that day, worked at a jewelry store, so I would have worked from 9 to 6. And I mean, I had texted her all the time.
Remember y'all were kind of texting to some degree. Chris had either, how did it come to pass that Chris had convinced your dad to pay for his vacation? Did you know anything about that?
My mother had told me that Chris had booked another vacation. In my eyes, Daddy didn't go on vacation. Daddy loved to work. He just didn't do that. So it was kind of shocking. I kind of perceived it as Chris wanted a free hotel room or a condo in my eyes. But
your brother Chris, he offered, I believe, he was going to on this trip pay for all the food.
I don't know.
Do you believe him if I were to tell you that he said that? He was going to pay for all the food and the fishing and everything?
Doubtful.
Okay. Why would that be?
He never had any money to do that. He always had to ask for money for everything. He couldn't fly the girls in from Maine without help. So I don't see how that could have been possible.
Shock you that on the day of the 5th, after you guys had been investigated that day and you talked to Detective Hayes and Kuykendall, that he actually had to borrow $20 from Emily to get home? Did you ever hear about that?
No.
Okay. So you're talking to your mom some about that stuff that day and wedding stuff. Do you remember that?
Probably. At that time, I was in full wedding mode trying to plan our wedding because we had the deposit down at Vauxhall.
Okay. But did anything seem out of the normal that day?
No.
Just a normal life, normal communications with your mother.
I was in bliss. I was engaged. I was the happiest I've ever been.
Okay.
Everything was perfect in my eyes.
So the next morning, on the 4th, I believe you guys even had some phone conversations. Do you remember anything about that?
Well, we had picked up Cameron the night before because it was our time to have her come over, and so we drove up to Jefferson and got her and brought her home, and then we were going to Lake Lanier because that's what we do every year.
And you take your mom every year?
No.
Okay.
Since we were up there the weekend before, I asked my mother and Chad asked my dad.
Okay.
And my dad did not want to go, and I told my mom, I said, if you want to go, you're more than welcome, but this is what we're doing. This is our plans.
Okay. What do you remember about inviting her?
I just invited her. I was just like, hey, we're going to go do this. If you want to do something on 4th of July, this is where we'll be. It's fun. It's a fun place.
What did she say?
I think she said, sure, maybe, yeah, I'll go. I mean, she had told me the weekend before she was going to go.
Okay. And then the morning of the 4th, you guys were texting about it and talking about it. Did anything seem weird or out of place?
No. We woke up and we went out there. It was super packed. So
This is Margaritaville.
Margaritaville, yep. The whole beach was packed. All the chairs were taken. And I called her and was like, hey, we're going to go back home and we're going to get our chairs and stuff because there's nowhere to sit. But we put up our little pop-up tent and saved a spot because we lived 5 minutes down the road, not even. And told her we were going to go get our chairs and come back. And I told her she needed to bring one if she had one. And then she said she was working out in the yard and that she would be there later. And I said, okay.
And so she came?
Yeah, eventually around 12, 1 o'clock, I guess it was. It was later.
About noon?
Yeah,
Okay.
I would say so.
Somewhere in there. How did she seem? How was her demeanor?
Normal.
What did y'all do?
We roasted on the beach for a while, and then went to Land Shark Cafe, and because it was unbearably hot, and then we ate lunch. She ate with us. Cameron was there. And we went back to the beach, sat there for a while. I don't know if we did any of the water slides or anything that day, but I think it was 5, 6 o'clock maybe. And Cameron was begging to go be with Addison. And we were like, I don't know, because we had just picked her up the night before.
Would Cameron and Addison, they communicate to themselves via text?
Yeah, they were friends at that time, yeah.
Okay, so they'd already kind of figured out they're going back to grandma's.
Yeah, they were essentially the same age. They hanging out with each other.
Okay, so I guess Cameron told you, hey, I'm going back with Melody.
No, she asked. And Chad and I were like, I don't know, because we picked her up the night before. And we were like, I don't know. We really didn't want to, but she begged and begged. And so we were like, all right, for one night you can go out there. And Chad was supposed to work the next day, and I had the day off. So I was going to go, and I was like, I'll pick you up, and then we'll go shopping.
And that would have been on the 5th.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but back on the 4th, Cameron how did your mom respond when she asked to come over?
She said, okay, have you talked to Addison? And I don't know if my mother talked to Chris or not, but Cameron got in the car with her and they rode back.
Okay. Did y'all have any communication with Cameron that night or the next morning?
I probably wouldn't have. Chad would have.
Okay.
I was more or less, and I still am more or less, Chad's wife. She has a mom, and I didn't mother her by any means, so it would have been Chad that checked up on her.
Secondary parent role, step parent.
Correct.
Okay. But nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Nope. Everything seemed perfectly normal. Is that a fair assessment?
Yes.
Okay. So how did it come to pass that you were going to come the next morning and pick up Cameron? Because you were off that day?
I was off that day, so I knew I was going to have to go pick her up. But his father was living with us at the time. He had gotten in an accident and had to live with us because he was in the hospital for a while. So we took care of him. And he asked me that morning if I could drive him over to his friend Debbie's house. So I agreed and took him over there, and could have been 10:30 by the time I actually left the area. I'm not sure. But I drove directly over to my parents' house, and that's when I got there.
Okay. So somewhere between 10:30 and 11, you think?
Could have been. It was mid-morning.
All right. I'm going to show you what's previously been marked as Thrasher Exhibit 20. Was this the porch on your parents' house?
Yes.
All right. When you got there, what did you and your mom do?
She was sitting out on the front porch.
This porch?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
Is there some chairs right over here?
They're rocking chairs.
Okay.
I pulled up in the driveway and I parked and walked up. I think the girls were out there at that time. I know they came out there at some point, but she immediately said, "We've been looking for your daddy and we don't know where he is."
She said that to you?
Mm-hmm.
You didn't bring up to her, "Hey, where's daddy"?
Not that I can recall. I just remember her bringing it up because I was like, I don't know.
Was that early in the conversation? Had you?
Yeah, it was like immediately once I got there.
Okay. Then what did you go do next?
Well, I started talking to her and I'm like, "Well, what do you mean?" She was like, I can't find him. And I was like, "Well, where?" I mean, it wasn't unusual for them not to know where each other was at, but I was like, okay. And I kind of brushed it off. I was like, I wasn't worried about it. And so then she was like, "No, really, like."
Did she seem nervous? Like
Not nervous, but she seemed concerned.
Okay.
And I don't know if the girls were looking for him or whatnot. I have no idea. She just said that she could not find him. And I was like, "What do you mean?" I didn't understand. A lot about that day I didn't understand. But it wasn't long after Scott came up. Again, you don't go on that property and not show up immediately. And he came up and I asked him, I said, "Have you seen daddy?" And he was like, "No, I haven't seen him." And so then it just escalated into, it's all kind of a blur, but it escalated into, we need to find him. And
Did Scott say anything else that was odd or weird?
Well, I don't know if it was when I decided to search the house and just walk through it, or like I don't know which one came first. Or like I know I called Chris, I know I called Emily, I know I called Angela, I know I texted him, I emailed him, I called him, and none of those nobody knew where he was. But at some point I decided, I was like, I'm going to go look in the house. And I started in the upstairs. But before I stepped foot in that house, Scott looked at me and said, "I'm going to go look for a missing gun."
He said that to you?
He said that to me. And I remember.
As you're standing here at this door right here, this green door?
Yes.
Okay. And he just like grabbed you by the arm and said, "I'm going to look for a missing gun."
He didn't grab me by the arm, but he just turned and he put his hand on the door and he said, "I'm going to go look for a missing gun." And I'm like... And I kind of like, I remember pulling back and I was like, "What does he mean?" And I looked at Mama and I was like, "What is he talking about?" And she was like, "I don't know." And so he went into the house. And
so he was the first one in the house before you went in there.
He walked in the door first. I don't know where he went, because when I went straight up the stairs. I looked upstairs, I looked on the middle floor, and then I went to the bottom floor. And then that's when I proceeded to go outside.
Did you go up these stairs?
Correct.
And that's just walking straight in the door?
Straight in the door.
And if you take a right here, is that the kitchen?
Correct.
Okay. And that's looking back out that door?
Yes.
And you went upstairs. What did you do upstairs?
Just looked to see if he was anywhere. There was a door that went to like an attic, like a walk-in attic. And I checked everywhere.
Okay. So this was the kitchen. Obviously there's no furniture or anything, but this is the general layout of the home at the time.
Correct.
All right. So where did you go next after going upstairs?
I just walked to the main level. I don't know if I walked in the master bedroom. That would have been to the right, straight back from there. And then I walked in the basement.
Where did you go in the basement?
Probably into my dad's room. That would have been in that hallway right there.
Going towards these doors here?
No, the other way.
The other direction?
His bedroom was there, and then he had a bathroom that was over there straight back too. I probably would have looked there, I assume, just to see if he was there, since it was his room, and there was the living room, and then I just walked straight into his office because you could pass by the theater room, and I went into his office and he wasn't in there.
Okay, so this thing they've got listed on this Thrasher 17, this workshop, that was his office?
Yes.
Okay. And nothing, when you walked down into the basement, did you see anything out of place?
No.
And because you'd been down there, I mean, how often would you go to the basement?
I mean, every time we were over there, we would probably most likely go down in the basement because my dad was always working in his office.
So when you were down there, did you notice anything, you know, this looks like a bunch of very fine furniture. Did you notice anything broken?
Mm-mm.
Did you, I mean, what's underneath these candles appears to be glass fixtures holding up the candles.
Correct.
Anything out of place?
No.
Did you
Not that I
notice
recall.
any blood?
No.
Now, had you been there the weekend before, did you ever notice anything about your father being bit by a dog or anything like that?
Yes, when we walked into Jay Christopher's, my husband and I was on the right, he was on the left, and my dad was in front of us, and he was walking up the stairs because it was like a few stairs to go up into Jay Christopher's, I believe, and it was an awful, like, purple dog bite on the back side of his leg, like right above that, whatever, I guess that tendon that is. And my husband said, "Damn, Gary, like, what happened to your leg?" He said, "That damn dog bit me," meaning Motley, her little black, her little terrier dog.
So Motley was a kind of an ankle biter,
Yeah.
essentially.
Yes, I don't like that dog.
For lack of a better term. But you saw with your own eyes this injury to your dad's leg.
Yes, it was bad.
And it was from the weekend before his death.
It was purple by the time I saw it, and red. It looked bad.
Okay.
Enough for us to notice it.
So you walked past this dining room. These pictures were taken on the day of the 5th. This is Thrasher 81. You walked past this dining room, and this is how it looked
Yes, sir.
on that day? You notice anything broken or out of place there?
No.
This was your mom's room?
Correct.
Where was the mudroom in the house?
You just passed it. There was like the mudroom was the long kind of hallway, and it had a desk and cabinets, and then that was off of the mudroom, and it had the washer and dryer. My dad had like his cowboy hat hung up on the wall to the left there. And that was the mudroom, and then there was
This
a
is your
pantry.
dad's cowboy hat?
Yeah.
Okay. And this is Motley's bed?
Yeah. Well, all the dogs' bed.
How many dogs lived in the house?
Too many. We had Motley, Lucy. One time we had what we called Elizabeth Taylor. She was a little teacup Shih Tzu. They had Luke, Leroy. They were the biggest white labs I've ever seen in my entire life. And then Scott had a Chihuahua. And I think that's all the dogs he had. I know he had some cats too, but the cats never came in the house.
Did your dad tell you where he was bitten by the dog?
For Motley,
Yes.
I mean, it was on the back of his leg.
Well, no. Where in the house? Where was he when it? Did
no,
he say?
I don't believe so.
Okay. So you never would have seen any of these droplets of alleged blood?
No.
And you went down these very stairs on this same day? Yes?
And many times after that.
Walk past these floors?
I would not have been looking.
And the furniture would have been exactly like this on that day?
Yes.
Did Scott ever tell you that this was the drawer where he said the gun was missing from?
No.
Okay. Did you check for any missing guns?
No.
Let's go back to when he said that. He goes in the house. What did he do next?
I don't know what he did. I just know he said, "I'm going to go look for missing guns," and I was so taken back because our family doesn't do guns. My dad had like old shotguns that he kept in or they're my mother's, our grandfather's. They were family
kind of in
guns.
this picture above.
Yeah, that was like an old antique gun that belonged to my mother's side of the family. But my dad had like shotguns because he would, I don't know if he went like with his law partners or something, but they would go like dove hunting, I guess, and things like that. So I always remember, as long as I can remember, there were shotguns in like those big long zip up cases. But it's like, as far as like small guns, no.
No. So you never saw any in that house?
No.
Never saw any revolvers?
We would have never owned any.
So even back at the, what was the, y'all called it Hampton Hall? Mm-hmm. So you never saw a small snub-nosed revolver at that house?
It was only shotguns.
Did Chris ever tell you he found a snub-nosed revolver?
No.
Back at Hampton Hall in the 2012 era? Mm-hmm. Okay. Or Scott?
No.
Okay.
The only handgun that I knew of back in Hampton Hall was when my brother was in the Army. It was a black handgun. And he had gotten it, I guess, after he got in the Army. I don't know. That was the only one I ever remember seeing, ever.
Yeah. So you walked down here and you knew Scott had been in the house, right?
Yeah.
And you didn't see any of these droplets of blood?
No.
I'm fast forwarding because there's one image I specifically want to ask you. It may be easier to go to the... Were you ever made aware that a bullet was found right there under that ottoman?
The only time I was ever aware of a bullet was during the preliminary hearing.
Okay, that's the first time you'd ever heard of that.
Correct.
And you don't know if that was, you didn't know anything about it.
No, and I would have never looked there.
So you never saw this bullet
No.
laying in the floor.
No.
Do you find it odd that there is nothing around that bullet?
Yeah.
I mean, nothing that would have caught your imagination. No blood, no holes in the chair, nothing. It's just this bullet
I mean,
laying next to a piece of carpet.
If you compare it to all your Netflix documentaries, no, it doesn't make any sense.
So you never saw that?
No.
Okay, so Scott went in the house first before anybody else.
Correct.
That morning. Then what did Scott do? What did everybody do?
I don't remember where he went. I know that I went out my dad's office and you could walk down because I knew he was making the burn pile on like July 3rd because I remember Chris went over there and all of that. I mean, that was known. And so I had walked down and my mother came up shortly behind me and I saw one stream of like smoke coming off of the top of it. And there was like one stick that was laying by the side and I just picked it up and tossed it on there and she was there and I was like, it's still like smoldering. She was like, yeah, it's gonna be hot for a while. And I was like, okay. And I turned around and looked up and Scott was standing at the top of the hill, like where the driveway is, with both arms on his hips, just staring down at us. And at the time I was just like, mental image, I guess. And I was just like, okay. So I walked the edge of the property because
There's a pretty steep hill there. Did you go all the way down that steep hill?
I didn't think it was steep, but I went down there. I mean, I probably had sandals on, but I walked all the way down. I mean, in my mind, I'm thinking something happened to my dad. He's been out here working on the property, may have fallen out. Let's go look for him. So I'm searching everywhere. And I go walk that property line and I go over the dam that's by the left of the pond if you're standing on that side. And I walked up to the barn, probably walked either through the barn or around the barn. I don't really remember.
Now I ask you this, do you ever remember around this time Scott saying anything about the placement of the tractor? Did he bring that up? Did you hear that?
No.
Okay. All right, go ahead where you walked.
Walked up there and I was calling out his name, trying to find him. I was getting desperate at this point and hoping I would find him. And I just had this gut feeling that something was wrong. And I had turned and walked down the driveway, and I was standing right as the driveway dips, and Scott calls me.
On your phone?
On my phone. And I'm looking over the pond and kind of just standing there at the fence, and he goes, Amanda, like something to the tune of like, Daddy's in this burn pile. Like, I know what I've seen. I've been in Iraq. I know what burned bodies looked like. And I'm just sitting there on the phone going, what are you talking about? And he was like, there's something in this burn pile. And I was like, what are you talking about? And pure just denial, I guess. And either he hung up the phone or I hung up, but I immediately called Chad and I said, you need to get here right now. This is what Scott is saying, and you need to come get Cameron. You have to come get your daughter. And next thing I know, I don't know if he walked over. I mean, everything, your whole world stops. And he came over and grabbed me by the arm as hard as he could, and he got in my face.
Who are we talking about?
Scott.
Okay.
He got in my face and he screamed at me. He said, I know what I saw. I know what it is, Amanda. And I was just, again, going like, what? And next thing I know, he said he called the 911, paramedics, whatever, and I walk up to the driveway, and there's like a fork in the road.
I have to ask you this question, and I'll move on from this topic quickly, but you walked down to the burn pile earlier. And you and your mom looked at it together.
Briefly.
And neither one of you saw what you would believe to have been human remains.
Thank God, no.
But you say Scott was up behind you on the hill just staring at you both.
Yes.
Okay. So going back to when the paramedics arrived, what happened next?
I was standing in the driveway and my mom had walked up. And I was like, what is going on? She said, I don't know. She just kept saying, I don't know. And I was just in shock at this point. And next thing I know, fire trucks, paramedics, and all of this. And she just said, why is he holding them up at the end of the driveway? And I said, I don't know. I have no idea. And it felt like an eternity. And I refused to go over there. I didn't want to go over there. And this poor paramedic, I'll never forget him. He was standing there with a gurney, and he goes, I'm so sorry for your loss. And that was the first time anybody ever told me about my dad being dead. And I said, so you're telling me that my dad is in that burn pile back there? And he just looked at me in shock. It was just like, he couldn't say anything back. And Chris was sitting on the bed of his truck, just looking down at the ground. He didn't say anything.
He didn't say anything?
No.
And what was your brother Scott doing at that time?
I don't know. I guess they were over there, him and my mom. I don't know.
Did your brother, and I think I'm going to ask the judge after this question to go ahead and break here, because then we're going to go ahead and start talking about what happened after this day. But did your brother say anything else concerning at that time? And he'd mentioned a gun. Did he say anything else that resonates in your memory?
Which one, Chris or Scott?
Either one.
No, Chris, no.
What about Scott?
I don't think I talked to Scott much after that. I think he was off. I don't really recall. I really felt like every bone in my body was broken at that point. I remember talking to Hayes for a little bit and standing at the fence. And he could have told me I had purple hair and 5 eyes. I wouldn't have recalled. And I just kept going through my head of just like, if he's gone, he's like, our life has changed forever. And it was awful. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy.
I'm going to show you what has been previously marked as, I believe, bot song 4. Is this you?
Yes.
Were you aware there was a trail camera on the property?
No, not really.
Okay. And is this your mother?
Yes.
Okay. And that spot's on 5. And who is this?
Scott.
Is that also Scott?
Yes.
I'm going to ask you a question, and then I think we should probably go ahead and break before we move on to the next phase. Would it shock you to know that Scott Ferris deleted, that's a picture of him backing away from the phone, from the trail cam after deleting the trail cam at that very moment as y'all are searching for your daddy?
Yes. It would shock me. We were looking for my dad. Why? I don't. Like, again, I didn't know that he had a trail camera. But that is concerning.
Judge, I think we should break.
It's here. So we'll break for lunch. We're going to take an hour, so we'll start back up at 1 o'clock.
Let's move forward post July the 5th. What did you notice about the change in your family dynamics?
After that had happened, I immediately had to take care of my mom. It was probably July 6th. All of my brothers and sister looked at me and said, all right, you take her. And so I immediately had her with me. She lived with us, I can't tell you how long, months. Because she didn't
This was in 2018.
Yes.
Yes, okay.
After everything had happened, this was like July 6th forward. And she lived with us. She didn't want to go back to the property. Eventually it came to the point of like, okay, you can go now. And so she went back, but I had to help pay for house insurance and car insurance and power bills and things like that. So I was kind of having to take care of the situation from that point. But Emily went back to Tennessee. Chris was in Atlanta, and Scott, I think, was staying at somebody's house, I guess, or went back to the property once it was, well, I know he went back to the property after it was released, but I don't know if he stayed with a friend for a while.
Okay. Were you ever part of any discussions with an attorney who told everybody not to talk?
Correct.
Okay.
On July 6th, I guess it was. I don't remember.
Friday, the next day?
Yes. It would have, somebody, I don't know who it was, maybe it was a consensus thing, but essentially it was, we needed somebody to help us. We didn't know what was going on.
Here, from that time period, if you need to look for the dates.
I didn't know what to do at that moment, but I knew that, what you see on TV, let's get an attorney to handle it. And somebody gave me Eric Durlacker's number. I did not have it, so somebody gave it to me. I don't know if it was one of my siblings or my mom. I have no idea. I can't remember. So I called him and I said, I need help. I don't know what to do. I need somebody to guide me through this, or take care of it, really, is what I wanted. I was like, take care of this.
Was this, by the way, I'm sorry to cut you off,
You're fine.
but timeline-wise, was this while your mother was being interviewed by Detective Hayes?
Correct.
Okay.
This was the day of the 6th, so
Okay.
Friday. And I called Eric, I don't know what time, and he just gave me Manny's number. And told them that Deputy Hayes had my mother in the room and was questioning her, was questioning Scott, and they said, well, just let them know that she has an attorney. And we told him a couple of times, but she stayed in there for another hour or so. And then she finally came out, and we went to the attorney's office. Everybody as a family went down there.
And that's when he said, y'all stop talking. Everybody stop talking.
Correct.
Anybody who knows anybody, stop talking.
Correct.
Okay. So when did it become apparent, or what could you tell from Scott and Chris breaking off from the family?
They eventually got very angry and irritated. I know Chris got mad at me because I told one of the detectives, I think his name was Tommy, that he decided not to go on vacation. Apparently that was a problem. He said, we aren't supposed to talk to the attorney. So we were all on the same page.
You mean law enforcement?
Yes, sorry, law enforcement. that we should basically just go to the attorney if we have any questions, and just to keep to ourselves, and that's it. And he was handling the situation, the attorney.
In this time period or ever before, had you ever heard your brother Scott say, "This is my property.
Yes.
This is my house"?
Multiple times. He flaunted the fact that was his property. I almost kind of like joked in a way he kind of vicariously lived through my dad.
Kind of like the movie Step Brothers. You ever seen that?
I don't know if they took ownership of their dad's stuff.
Well,
but yeah,
okay.
I mean, in that same situation, and grown up, still living at home. Yes, I can
Okay.
see it in that aspect.
but he would claim things as his that were not his. That's fair to say.
They belong to my mother and my father.
Okay. And you say, I mean, how often would you hear him say this?
He wouldn't say it like all the time, but it was always just like my farm, my property, my Kubota. He would get on social media. He would say, "This is my property." I mean, he claimed ownership to it. That's for sure.
Okay. And speaking of social media, had you ever seen your brother shoot guns or anything like that?
He was in the military. He was always shooting guns at the house,
Okay.
from what I was heard and what he said.
Did you ever see any of his videos on social media?
No.
Okay. But you knew he was always shooting guns.
He was always doing something around there, but yeah, it was a known thing that they used to go and I don't know if he would hunt stuff. I don't really know how that works because there were so many houses that were in close proximity, but I know that he would have leisurely kind of shootings back there.
Okay. So going on through late July and things like that, just to kind of talk about it, were there any issues? Did you ever have any communication or talk to Rusty during that time?
No.
Had you ever met him yet?
No.
Okay. And that would have been what, later on, about 2019, that you communicated with Rusty Barton?
When she was arrested, that was the first time I personally spoke to him
Okay.
that I can recall.
All right. But you'd known during this time, you'd heard about Rusty Barton, yes?
Yes, there were rumors, but I didn't know the depths of it until the preliminary hearing.
So that was in 2019.
Well, yeah. Yeah.
Right about the time
Because she
your
was already
mother-
arrested at that point. So, yeah, I didn't know about all the meetings and all that kind of stuff. That was new to me at the preliminary hearing.
Okay. So going back to, tell me about the estate and how things were managed with the siblings for the family.
What do you mean?
Was your brother appointed as the executor of the estate?
Nobody was. The estate was locked down immediately when the house was locked down. My mother couldn't go down the road and get a sandwich if she wanted to. She was totally reliant on me
Okay.
from day one.
Well, I guess I'm talking more about, there was properties that were owned by the family, and was your brother Chris ever appointed over that?
My sister at one point got a coroner's letter that we did not know about. My mother had tried to get a lady named Diane to help her figure out what needed to be done with the estate because it had been so long, and that's when she went to the courthouse and realized that Chris had filed for, I don't know what you call it, for the estate, but he was given ownership of the estate, and we did not know.
Okay. Well, tell me how that went.
Not well. I know that it turned into, I texted Emily at one point and I said, Diane's told me that there's been money taken out, and my dad owned the condo that my sister lived in Tuscaloosa, and said that it had, I don't know if it went into foreclosure or whatnot, but a property management company was in charge of, they would get the check and then Daddy, I assume, would give it to the mortgage company at that point, and it was not being done. So the condo was lost.
And that was the condo in Tuscaloosa?
Correct, and that's when I petitioned to have the third-party estate attorney. So none of us had our hands on it. It was purely an outside source, and I did not know that was an option until my mother spoke to Diane.
Okay. And so, did they loop you in on any of this, Chris and Scott and Emily?
No,
Right, so you were kind of left on the outside.
nobody talked to me about it.
Right. And is that because you were the only one showing any support for your mother?
I had to take care of her. I had no option but to take care of her at that point. Emily ran off back to Tennessee, and Chris and Scott were no help. I had to I financially took care of a lot that first year. It was really hard on us. But we did it because it had to be done. God forbid something happened to the house. And I mean, the mortgage was over almost probably $5,500 a month. And then the home insurance, I paid for that. So if anything were to happen to it, we wouldn't be in a really big situation. But that was $600 a month. Paid for the car insurance on all of the cars, including Scott's. And that's kind of where Scott and I fell out.
Over his car.
Over his car, because I was having to pay the car insurance and he didn't have a job at the time, and it was really hard to get money out of him, and I didn't have the money to be paying for all of that. So it just got into arguments, and it finally, when Jeff Restbridge, the state attorney, got appointed, I just said, please defer all of your questions to him, because it was a losing battle.
Did you ever become aware that Scott would call law enforcement, 911 on your mother pretty regularly in 2019?
From my mother.
Okay. Did you ever hear any of these calls, or did it come up on an altercation between the two of them?
No, she would always call me and say what was happening, and I told her she either needed to audio record it or video record it, or nobody was going to believe her.
Okay. Your father was a very large man. Mm-hmm. Do you know how much he weighed?
280, 290, 300.
Right in that area?
I mean, he was 6'5". I'm 5'7", and I came up to his chest, right about here.
Okay. How much do you think your mother weighs?
125 pounds soaking wet.
Okay. Does she have any physical conditions of note?
She had scoliosis really bad. She's had it all of her life.
How bad? Like, is her back?
Yeah, if you look at it, I mean, there's probably a couple inches difference from the side of her back to the other. She got kicked in the leg by one of the horses, and she was in a cast for a really long, one of those kind of, I think it was like a soft cast for a while, but she couldn't walk. She had to do rehabilitation on that. But other than that, I mean, she's been active, I guess you would say.
Your Honor, if I may have a moment. That's all this time, Your Honor.
Hi, Mr. Ferris.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Amanda, I want to begin with, you testified a lot today about, I guess, how you view certain evidence. Is that fair to say?
I don't know what you mean by that.
Have you kind of, when the defense counsel would ask you questions, you would respond, and that's really based on what you know in this case or your beliefs. Is that fair?
I would say it's mostly opinion, but I don't know much about anything. All I know is from when Deputy Hayes told me about that my father was shot, and that was from my mother the very first night at Freehome Fire Station, and then what we know in the preliminary hearing.
I'm sorry, what was that last part?
The preliminary hearing.
Okay. On July 5th, 2019, actually a year to the day that your father's remains were found, there was a preliminary hearing where certain evidence was introduced that gave you more knowledge of the case. Is that true?
Yes, sir.
But what I want to go through is you do not have any personal knowledge of the details of what happened July 3rd, 2018 from 9:30 p.m. to 2:30 a.m. the next morning. You don't have any personal knowledge of what happened, right?
No, sir.
You don't have any personal knowledge of what happened on January 4th, 2018 from about 6:30 that morning until about 2 p.m. when your mom came to the lake where you were at, right?
Only what she told me, that she was coming to see me.
And you would agree with me that a lot of what you know or has been told to you by your mom.
Absolutely.
You agree that a major source of your information, the predominant overreaching source of information is from what your mom told you, right?
Correct.
I mean, an example of that is things that happen outside of your presence, whether it was what Scott said or Chris said, your mother would come back and say, this is what happened, right?
To some degree, but I would be with my brothers if they said something directly to me.
Right, but if you were not at the house when afterwards there were questions about the property and things like that, if your mom was just there, she'd come back and tell you her version of things that happened, right?
Correct.
So it depends a lot on her credibility when what she says, right?
Absolutely.
You know there's evidence of her lying through this trial?
I don't know. I mean, if it was in the preliminary hearing, maybe.
But you agree with me that credibility counts, right?
Yes, sir.
I mean, your credibility,
Yes, sir.
not just in what you say, but also how you say it.
Yes, sir.
I mean, are you trying to testify here objectively, not your thumb on the scales at all? You're just trying to say, this is what I know?
This is just what I know. It's not my job to figure out what happened.
And so when you choose your words, sometimes, like you said that Emily ran back to Tennessee. You used the word run. Is that just your opinion on what she did?
Yes, I felt like she abandoned me and did not help me.
You don't have any personal knowledge of who was present at your mom and dad's house on July 3rd, 2018 from 9:30 p.m. to 2:30 a.m., right?
No.
You don't know what happened or who was present to do anything, correct?
I mean, I assumed my mother was there, and I assumed Scott, but that was because she told me Scott came home that night.
Okay, but you don't have any personal knowledge of that, right?
No.
It's just based on what she said.
Yeah, because I wasn't there, so I wouldn't know.
And July 4th, that Wednesday, you don't have any personal knowledge of what your mother was doing on the property before she came to see you at the lake, right?
Only what she told me. She was working on the property.
But she did say she was working on the property, right?
Correct.
But outside of that, you have no personal knowledge of the actual events in this case that led to the murder of your father.
No.
You don't know any circumstances about where your father was shot with one bullet, do you?
No.
You don't know any circumstances about where your father was shot with another bullet, do you?
No.
You don't know where in the house it was done?
I don't think that was brought up in the preliminary hearing. I just think that, I don't even know if they even said that he was shot in the house.
And you don't know how, what was done in this case to conceal the crime, right?
No.
You have no personal knowledge.
No.
You're just testifying to the best of your ability of things that occurred kind of before and after. Is that fair?
You have very, very limited information.
Now, you also don't have any personal knowledge, although you'd agree if two people in a conversation, those two people have knowledge of what was said, assuming everything's normal, they would know what was talked about in conversations, right?
What do you mean?
If you and I were having a conversation like we are now, I mean, you would know and I would know because we're intentionally trying to relate information and messages to one another. We would know what's going on, right?
Yeah, I guess.
I mean, assuming we're not insane or anything like that, we would know what was said or what was actually said or not said, correct?
Yeah, if you were only there to see it yourself, that's the only way you truly know.
Sure. And you would agree with me that in this case, we're testifying many years later than when the actual stuff occurred, right?
Oh, yes.
And sometimes you can do, when you're looking back on what happened, it wasn't at the time. So sometimes, even with the passage of time, whether it's from memory or from intent, sometimes you don't remember exactly what was said.
Absolutely.
But your memory is usually better at the time that something was said than, say, 6 years down the road. Is that fair?
Repeat that?
Generally speaking, your memory, when you say something at that time, is better than your memory of what was said maybe 6 years after the fact.
I think certain things stick with you more than others, but time definitely is not helpful.
And I think that's fair. And so if you were told that Gary's in the burn pile, that would be something that would stick with you, right?
Yes.
So you don't have any personal knowledge what was said between your mother and her lover Rusty on July 3rd, 2018 at 9:26 p.m.
No.
Did you know they talked for 4 minutes that day?
It was brought out in the preliminary hearing that they had a phone call.
Did she ever tell you exactly what they said during that phone call?
I did not discuss anything with her.
And you have no personal knowledge of what was said between your mom and Rusty on July 3rd, 2018 at 11:28 p.m. where they talked for 5 minutes to you?
No, I didn't know they were communicating at that time.
And it shocked you when you found out, right?
When I found out they
About
were
Rusty.
About Rusty, yes, that when I found out at the preliminary hearing that they had the relationship that they did, that was very shocking.
Yeah, it shook your world, didn't it?
Yes, but it wasn't the first time.
On July 3rd, you have no personal knowledge of what was said between your mom and the defendant on your mom and Rusty on July 3rd, 2018 at 11:45 p.m. where they talked for an hour and 14 minutes, do you?
No.
You don't know what was said between your mom and Rusty on July 4th, 2018 at 2:20 a.m. where they talked for about 36 minutes, right?
No, I don't.
You do know that Rusty came back and, quote, recanted that statement in some way, right?
They said that in the preliminary hearing, yes.
But afterwards, your mother told you to go and talk to Rusty, didn't she?
She had asked me to
And y'all did talk to Rusty.
when she was arrested.
And y'all talked to him about that, right?
The only thing I remember talking to him was when I asked him, because I heard in the preliminary hearing that she said he's on the burn pile, whatever it was. I said, did she say that? And he said no.
And you have no idea what was said between your mom and Rusty since July 5th, 2018, even up to this day, right?
No.
You do have personal knowledge of your loyalty to your mother, though, don't you?
I have loyalty to my mother and my father, yes.
I think you said on direct your words, you have a loyalty to your mother to a fault.
Yes. I think anybody I feel that way towards.
And it's fair to say that you're biased in favor of your mom.
I wouldn't say how I'm biased in favor of it. I believe that somebody is innocent until they're proven guilty.
So would you say that you do believe in your mom, though?
She has told me that she's not guilty, and all I can do is believe that until somebody can prove she is guilty. So I would like to believe that my mother had nothing to do with this. Some may call it denial, but I call it honoring my mother, and I would do the exact same thing if it was for my dad.
But you won't do that same thing for Scott or Chris, though, will you?
No, it's very hard to explain, but not talking to them is alienating them. Again, communication is a two-way street. It's not just me that turned away, and it's okay that I turned away. It's even in the Bible that says that it's okay that I turned away.
I want to talk to you about your foundation for testifying today and some of your knowledge. Have you talked to, now, when I say this, there's nothing wrong. The two attorneys here are honorable men. I consider them friends. They're honorable. Don't hear me saying that. But I did want to know, you've talked with them on several occasions, right?
Correct.
When was the last time that you talked with Mr. Ray or Mr. Weaver?
We talked today?
Did you meet with them to practice or go over your testimony?
No.
Did you talk about what you're going to say?
No.
Do you have any discovery?
Do I have any discovery? No.
You haven't listened to any recordings?
No.
Have you read anything?
No.
Have you watched anything on TV?
I've seen it pop up on the news, and I've had people troll my Facebook account.
Has your husband Chad Bruce told you anything about the case?
Not that I'm aware of.
Has anybody in any shape or form given you information about the case?
People have tried to come up and communicate, and I have to stop them.
But you have talked to your mom about the case, and she's given you details of her version of things, right?
She more and I talked about it the first year after this happened. When she was arrested, we had phone calls, and then it just got to a certain point. I had my son, and I didn't feel like talking about this anymore. And when she came to live with us, it was a rule that I set down, and I said, we are not going to discuss this because it was best for everybody, and it wasn't needed.
So if you could shrink the world down to the person that you've got most of your information from, it's not going to be the attorneys, correct? Mm-hmm. It's not going to be Scott and Chris, correct?
No, I guess not.
It's going to be your mom, right?
Everybody has their own opinion of everything, so I take everything with a grain of salt.
But my question is, it's going to be your mom, right?
I guess since I've seen her the most, that would make the most plausible answer, I assume.
So yes, it will be your mom.
Yes.
This is
Pain 1. This was Emily's wedding, is that right?
Yes,
Now, these are better days here for the family,
it was.
and everybody's looking great, smiling, looking wonderful.
It was a really good day.
Would you like to be able to go back to those days?
Yes.
Now, I know a child cannot measure the love for their mother, but you do love your mom, right?
And my dad, yes.
And you are her child?
Yes,
You're her daughter?
that is correct.
You're her favorite daughter, aren't you?
I wouldn't say that.
You're her favorite child, aren't you?
I wouldn't say that.
Do you say that she has the same positive feelings towards the other three as she does to you as we sit here?
I think my mother equally talked about us positively and negatively. You're
the only child that's siding with her, though, correct?
I'm the one that's choosing to believe that she's innocent until proven guilty.
And it's your belief. I understand that. But again, my question is, you're the only one that's on her side or choosing to believe as you do, correct?
I'm the only one choosing to believe in the justice system.
And you're the only one that's had a continuing relationship with her since the murder of your father, right?
Yes.
In fact, at times, you've not only been a daughter and a child of her, but you've been an advocate for her, right?
I have been a support system
And,
in the sense of I had to be the strength when nobody else would be.
and what I mean by that, there are times that she would call you from jail or contact you somehow when she's out, and she would ask you to go and talk to other people and do things, right?
Correct.
She would get you, whether it's with the house or a meeting with the attorney, she wanted you to relay certain information. Is that fair?
She wanted to, but sometimes I would, sometimes I wouldn't. A lot of times I would say yeah, and then I wouldn't do it.
But times you would, right?
Yes.
And you haven't heard the jail calls that we have between you and her. You haven't seen that at trial, have you?
No.
So you don't know what has been said between you and her that the jury already knows about, right?
No. I know it. Potentially, if I heard it, I would obviously, if it was a conversation between us.
And you agree with me that your relationship with your brothers and sisters has soured since all this happened?
Unfortunately.
And it upsets you because they're not taking up for your mom, right?
No, it upsets me because it shows how much that they love me. It has nothing to do with her. It has everything to do with I'm their sister, and they left me.
You feel like you've been abandoned?
Yes, I lost my whole family that day.
Would you agree with me that you lost your family because your father's been murdered?
That was the cause and reaction, I guess you would say.
And from their standpoint, it's fair to see that they have feelings that their mother has murdered their father, so they have hard feelings because of that.
And rightfully so.
Now, you talking about, I was asking you earlier about your beliefs and your opinions on things, and you do give some information. Like, do you remember telling the defense on direct examination that on July 4th of 2018, you just wanted to have a quiet time with your family at Lake Lanier? Is that
What I want every day of my life.
And you talked about that's because there was drama with Chris and Jenna the year before, right?
Correct.
There's usually more to the story than just what one side brings out at times. Isn't that true?
I could say that's true.
Your husband, Chad Bruce, is kind of a prankster. He teases people, does he?
He's funny. He likes to have fun.
So you talked about Jenna getting upset that day and all that, but that day in 2017, y'all actually scared Jenna twice, didn't you?
It may have been twice. I know of once because she was not very happy with me.
You know, one time when she was sitting in the car and went up and scared her. The next time y'all hid behind a bush when she came by and scared her again, right?
I know about the bush, yes.
Yeah. And then she got so upset that afterwards because she didn't want to be scared, and you did it twice, that she actually kicked a drink and went all over you and Chad, right?
Correct.
And you basically had to talk to Chad and say, hey,
I mean, I wouldn't have to talk to him, but
It made y'all mad, didn't it?
I wouldn't say it made us mad. We were just like, I think that was a bit of an overreaction. We were just having a good time.
Well, you tell all the people that at that point you decided to never go back out with them again.
That was because of their drinking.
Right. But you can understand if you get scared twice, it can upset people, right?
I understand that it was insensitive at the time, but it was all in good fun.
Could be
The
bullying.
girls were with us when we did that, I believe. I'm almost positive that they were with us.
Right, well, it could be offensive or bullying somebody if you do it twice in one day, right?
I think that's a bit much to say. They're my brother and my sister-in-law. I've known them forever.
But that's how you felt about it, right?
What do you mean?
How you feel about the situation is kind of your beliefs, right?
I guess you would say that. Yes, everybody has their own opinion.
Now, through this, there's been times when you talked about, you had a lot of emotions earlier today. You were crying a lot, and it's tough for you, is it, to do this, isn't it?
Yes, I wouldn't wish this on my worst enemy. This is the worst thing anybody could go through.
But throughout this process, you actually had different emotions where you were angry or irritated towards your family. Is that fair?
I had a lot of anger for many years after this.
And how we see you today, how you emote today, is not necessarily how you emoted on a jail call or how you had your emotions you would have around Scott or Chris, right?
Yeah, I've done a lot. I've come in a relationship with God, and I've had my son, and that has drastically changed my life and my outlook and how I handle certain situations.
And so you have gotten upset and gotten on them, barked back with them as they barked with you in the past, right?
I would say so. I mean, I've reviewed text messages knowing that this trial has come, and I know that I understand why they feel the way they do. I do. I really do understand, and they're rightful for that. But I don't feel like the way that they treated me in response was needed, to the point of where when my dad's mother died, they didn't even tell me she had a stroke and she was on her deathbed. I had to find out through my aunt on social media because my siblings didn't even have the common courtesy to tell me.
You're upset with them.
At that time, yes.
And there are two main categories that y'all were, whether you want to say arguing or disagreeing over or having hard times over. It was the murder of your father, that's one, right?
Yes, very
And
hard.
then the other is, what do we do with the estate afterwards, correct?
Correct.
So one was the murder and the other was kind of related to money or property, right?
It was always an argument. It couldn't ever be civil. It always had to be an issue. And I was doing everything that was legal. I worked with the estate attorney. I did everything I was supposed to, and everybody knew what I was doing.
And I think the term you were trying to find earlier, because I'm a lawyer and I forget it too, because I don't do that as a temporary administrator of the estate.
That sounds correct.
And that's what Chris he had been appointed temporary administrator.
He had petitioned or whatever, I don't know what you call it, but he went to the courthouse and was able to get.
Right. And so if someone dies without a will, their estate is probated, has to go through the court system, correct?
As far as I know, yes.
I mean, that's why you've got other people, you got a third party, I think you described as, it's in the court system, right?
Yes, I wanted somebody that was not tied to the family to handle it.
Good, right. I mean, that's common sense. That's very good because family can have lots of hard feelings or strong feelings, right?
Yes,
So a third party is a good thing, correct?
absolutely.
But until you get to that, sometimes the family has to be involved in what's going on, right?
Correct.
And when you try to get property back, because part of the thing that you have to do is make sure that the estate doesn't dissipate or go away. You have to protect it.
Correct.
So your view may be when it comes to getting things back like the Mercedes or something like that, you may disagree in how they're doing it, but you would agree that they would have a duty to try to make sure all property is accounted for, right?
Absolutely.
It just upset you that it was your brother at times and the way he did it.
I was upset because I was having to pay car insurance, and then I had to drop car insurance on, I think, the Sequoia or something. But basically, he was taking his truck and the Sequoia and things like that. But it was always an argument, and I didn't want to be responsible for any of it anymore.
You didn't ask for any of this, did you?
God, no.
No, you don't want this. No.
No.
You know, they say most divorces happen over money. You've heard that before?
Yes.
Money causes a lot of problems in many ways, right? But in your situation, you not only have money, but you have murder, right?
I guess, yeah.
I mean, you agree your father was murdered, right?
Yes.
Now, when your mom, at times, through years, she was living with you and Chad at one point?
In the very beginning, yes. And then after she came home, yeah.
Yeah, she would eat your food, use your resources, stay at your house, things like that?
Stage my house?
Stay. She would use your resources,
Stay.
your food, money,
She was
electricity.
100% reliant on me.
Now, do you know David and Alan?
Yes.
You see Alan here in court today?
Yes.
They're good friends,
Of hers, yes.
and they've been helping her out during this time?
I believe so, yes.
Let me ask you some questions about your dad. As you look at the photograph, was this a happy day for everybody?
It was.
How much do you love your dad?
My dad? He's the best thing that ever happened to me. I don't miss him.
He was a great provider.
Absolutely.
He would take care of Chris.
He took care of all of us.
You, Scott, Emily, provided everything for y'all, right?
Yes.
And he gave money to them.
Yes.
And at times, you understand that, do you not, that his money, the money he earned, that's his money. You can also say it's her money too, but he's earned that money. You understand that that's his money.
He can do whatever he wants with it.
That's right. He can do whatever he wants. So if he wanted to treat one child different from another child, he could do that, right?
That was his prerogative, yes.
That was his prerogative. If he wanted to give money to Chris, even when Chris is not doing what he should be doing in your eyes, he could still do that, right?
It was his money.
Yeah, if he wanted Scott to live in the land and just kind of freeload for a while until he gets his feet, if it was beneficial for him, he could do that, right?
That's what he chose to do.
If he wanted to give Emily money for something, give her a loan or whatever it was, it's his money. He could do that, right?
All you had to do was ask.
But there are many times that you would disagree with that and voice your disagreement to other people, right?
Repeat that?
You would have your own opinions at times that you didn't like that.
He told me he was very upset. He made it clear that he did not necessarily like giving out money. He told me that directly.
My question is that you would voice to other people throughout this process that you didn't think it was fair, or you didn't like how Chris or Scott or Emily were using, getting money from your dad. You didn't like that, did you?
I think they needed to grow up and stop asking their dad for money.
And you made it known to many people that that's how you felt, right?
I guess.
Your dad gave you, I think, 2 cars. Is that right?
We all got a new vehicle when we got our driver's license.
Pay for your college when you went.
Yep.
Pay for your apartment.
At college, yes.
Gave you $8,000 for the venue for your wedding.
I think it was 6, maybe 8.
$6,000?
I don't know, something like that. It was just the deposit. Well, it didn't give me the money, but he paid for it.
Do you know how much you paid overall for your wedding?
I didn't get to have a wedding, so just the deposit on Foxhall.
You didn't have a wedding?
I had a wedding, but Chad and I fully funded it.
And did you know that your mother, do you know if your mother ever asked Emily back for the loan that
She
your
had
dad had
said
given her?
something about Emily having a loan.
Did you know that, do you know whether or not your mother, after the death of your dad, went to Emily and said, I need that money back?
I think so, but I'm not 100% sure.
Did your mom ask any money back from you for anything?
She wouldn't need money from me.
She didn't ask you for any money, though, did she?
I mean, I had to support her, but I never had taken cash from my father since I was in my early 20s.
You made on direct, you talked about there that your dad's view was, I think he actually said to you, you told law enforcement during the interview that your dad said something along the lines of, once you're married, done, no exceptions. Do you remember that?
I don't know in what context you mean.
When it came to you talking about the view of your father, you know there was troubles with Ted Wiley, how your dad viewed marriage, because you talked to him one day, I think, about after he helped you move out of the apartment with the other boyfriend. Y'all sitting in a restaurant eating. Mom gets up. Remember that? And you say, Dad,
She wasn't there with us.
Okay. Do you remember telling law enforcement or statements that your dad's view was basically once it's a marriage you're in?
He said he loved her and he wanted to be with her.
Do you remember there was a time you said that I think you were talking to Cameron, insisting that she understands that if, in marriage, if you make a vow to somebody, you take that seriously.
I don't recall that.
Remember your dad saying, in your words, saying something like, I'm glad one of my children understands the loyalty you're supposed to have in a marriage?
That could sound something like my dad would say.
So in your mind, is it accurate to say, in your mind, what you understood your dad, once he was in this marriage with the defendant, he was not going to divorce her?
No, he never seemed at one point that he was going to divorce her.
So she was stuck in the marriage because he wasn't going to divorce her.
I begged them both to divorce each other because they were miserable, and I was sick of hearing about it.
So we have taken something outside of your dad for the marriage, for her to leave that marriage, right?
One more time, I'm sorry.
It would have taken something outside of your dad. Your mother would have had to do something to leave that marriage.
No, I think my mother could have left at any time, and so could have my dad. They both were grown. I think they could have both made that decision, but I think they just wanted to stay married.
At some point, you thought your dad was paranoid about your mom cheating on him. Is that true?
I think that's fair to say ever since she had the affair with Ted.
Right, and the word you used when you talked to law enforcement, you just said you thought your dad was paranoid about your mom possibly cheating on him. Remember using that word paranoid?
No, but rightfully so. If you have a partner that cheats on you, I don't think that feeling would ever go away.
Right. But have you come to learn that she actually was cheating on your dad with Rusty?
And since then, yes.
It's not paranoia when it's true, correct?
Absolutely. I don't blame him for how he felt.
But that other piece of evidence that you didn't have, that new information that she was having an affair with Rusty, that changes things, doesn't it?
I mean, in what sense?
That you thought your dad one time was paranoid because you thought mom was not cheating. Then you get new facts, evidence, and find out mom's cheating. That changes your view on things, doesn't it? To
It
some
changes
degree.
my views, but at the same time, it wasn't shocking because I knew what she did with Ted.
So facts and other things that come to light can have an effect on how you view things, right?
I think it can.
Now, you say that you did not know about Rusty Barton and the affair. Is that right?
We knew of him. There were rumors. I don't remember from who. He was in the picture. I knew he was at Emily's wedding. I didn't know why he was there. I remember my mom and him dancing and all of that, and I got upset, and
This is pane 3. Do you see Rusty in the background there?
I do.
You see him?
I
See
do.
him in the background there with your mom?
I do.
That's pane 4. Pane 5, you see Rusty in the background with your mom?
I do.
Pane 6, see him back there?
Correct.
See him over here with your mom? Your mom's right through here.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
See him with Chad right here?
Yes. Chad met everybody knew. We were only 6 months dating at that point.
And then pane 9, you see him there?
Correct.
This is pane 10. He's right there with your dad, isn't he?
Correct.
Is it not true that you knew about Rusty and the affair at that point?
Not the depth of anything. I just knew he was I knew he was related to Martha Jane. That was the depth of it. And then my dad would always say something, or Scott would say something, but I tried to stay out of it. I didn't want to get involved.
And did you not get upset, and your sister and brother see you get upset and say something because of Rusty was there at the wedding?
I don't know if they saw me, but
Was it
I know
not
that
offensive to you? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I remember vaguely I was intoxicated that night, but I remember he was there, and I don't condone that kind of behavior. I don't. So So I can see where I would have gotten upset.
It's just a situation where you see something like that, you just purposely just almost have ignorance, almost just saying, I don't want to see what's happening.
Partially of that, and I knew my dad knew he was there. If my dad accepted it, then I followed my dad's lead.
And you don't know, or do you know what things, how your dad has told other people, how he felt, how that affected him? You have any idea what he said? Or text or anything?
No, I didn't like to. After Ted, I told him, and the offensive pictures he sent me and the way he involved me with that, I made it very clear I didn't want to be involved.
So why did you tell law enforcement in July that you didn't know anything about the Rusty Barton affair?
In July,
2018.
because I didn't know the depths of anything.
But this was 2016.
I didn't, honestly, I wouldn't have, I knew he was there, but I didn't know, I thought he was related to Martha Jane. And then I just saw the way that they were interacting, and that wasn't normal.
You have learned some new information in this case, but I want to know, in the beginning, you just thought that your dad had heat stroke or something and had maybe passed out on the property on July.
Anything could have been
2000.
possible.
But that's what you were thinking. Maybe he had heat stroke or something, right?
Yeah.
And then when his remains were found in the burn pile, you were thinking, you were not thinking murder or anything, thinking maybe he just had a medical episode and fell in, correct?
Correct.
You told law enforcement, I just don't know. You were kind of, you just didn't know what happened, right?
I was in shock.
Yeah, in shock. You were able to talk to, I think, Sergeant Hands and then Detective Hayes.
I don't remember talking to Hands. All I remember was talking to Hayes. And again, Hayes could have told me I don't remember anything.
Right. And sometimes when we have something in our evidence called excited utterance. Sometimes when you're in shock or under the stress, you don't have time to come up with clever things or things. You just come off and just state what's in your heart, right?
I would assume.
So in many ways, being under stress or being under that excitement, you just say what is really there, right?
I guess.
When you learned the first time about your dad having a bullet in him, how did that make you feel?
Confused. Shocked. I mean, my mother was the first person that told me. And I didn't want to believe it. And then we had Manny, the attorney, and he was telling us it could be a lie. You know, you have people sitting there going, well, it may not be true. Or so you don't know.
I think on July 6th of 2018, at the Freeholm Precinct, your mother walked out after being interviewed by Detective Hayes, and you said your mother told you. But isn't it more accurate that Detective Hayes looks at your mom and says, have you told them yet? He actually had to prompt her to tell you about the bullet, right?
It would have been the night of July 5th because we had been out on the property all day long, out in the heat, and he finally asked them to go down, and Chad and I drove down there with them and waited as they interviewed Scott and my mother, and that's when she came out. He may have been talking to Scott at that time, but she said they're saying your daddy was shot, and I think that was pretty much about it.
Yeah. Detective Hayes had to tell your mom, have you told him yet, right?
Yes, it came from, she told me it was Hayes that told her, and she told me.
And you said she put her face in her hands, is that right?
I don't recall.
Let me ask you about some things that you didn't know. You say you did not know about the affair with Rusty, is that right?
Not what I know now.
Right. But in July of 2018, your testimony is you did not know about Rusty, is that correct?
I had heard rumors from the family that tried to ignore.
You didn't know about your mother's second or burner phone?
Scott had always been saying that she had a second phone. I never asked her about it. I didn't want to get involved.
Are you familiar with the last four digits of a phone number 1987 that your mother had?
No, 9029 was the only one I had.
Okay. Do you know whether or not your mother had a burner phone or another phone?
I purchased a phone for her right after all this happened because I needed a way to communicate to her, and then I bought another one probably in 2020.
Okay. But do you know about a phone number she had that ended in 1987 that she used to talk exclusively with Rusty?
No.
So you don't know about that?
Only from Scott going and saying that he saw her with 2 phones. That's all I knew.
And those 2 phones would have been before the phones that you got here, right?
Correct.
Do you know about your mom meeting Rusty almost weekly at times in Dalton?
Not until a preliminary hearing.
But you didn't know about that before?
No,
Right.
sir.
So before you knew about that, you believed your mother that she had not committed this crime, right?
That before that, I believe she didn't commit the crime.
Right.
That is correct.
And even knowing about the burner phone and the affairs with Rusty and in the burn pile, you still believe your mother hasn't committed this murder,
She
right?
told me she didn't do it, and she's never given me any reason to believe otherwise.
All right, let's talk about things to believe otherwise. Judge, may I approach? It's fair, so I'm going to put this, Judge, this time I tender evidence A. Ferris 1.
No objection.
We'll put it on the screen too. Your belief system when it comes to your mother comes from, in many ways, doesn't come from the evidence. It's coming from your worldview or your the way you see things. Is that fair?
Yes, and probably a little bit of denial.
I want to go to, this is A. Ferris 1. It's a phone extraction. And it contains text messages between, is it her? Who's this? Okay, this is your mother's phone. And I'm on page 2 of the screen here. It's kind of hard to, but there's this from and to. This is from your mom to you. Did you know about your mother going to Jamaica with Rusty?
No.
In September the 3rd of 2017, did you have any idea that she had gone on to, I think, had something to do with hedonism or hedonistic or something like that, a resort in Jamaica?
No.
All right. If you would, this is from her to you. You see your phone number, everything there?
Correct.
What is the date of this text message?
9/3/17.
Y'all step out. A. Ferris 1. Let's do it this way.
Well, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put it on this one.
Okay? All right, wait.
Keep that one blank so the jury can see from this screen and follow along, but then that's not being put on the camera.
So, Judge, I just saw another place on here as we scroll.
So that's fine.
Okay.
I mean, they're not looking at this screen, and they got it killed back there, so we're
So
good.
it's not going to go out even though I see it.
Correct. Arguably, we'll see.
Maybe you understand what we're trying to do, right?
I'll find out tonight when I.
Right. We're trying to keep some things redacted. So my understanding, Judge, is her phone number,
Right.
other information is not going to go on the internet.
That's what we're hoping to try
All
to
right.
do. All right, go ahead.
Let's do this. Getting back, you did not know about your mom going on a trip with Rusty to Jamaica. Is that right?
That's correct. I did not know.
On September 3rd, 2017, at 9:10 a.m., your mother sends you this text message. Can you just read out loud for us the body of the text message?
Sherry has talked me into going with her to Minnesota, leaving this afternoon, be back by next weekend. That's her home, family there, cabin in the woods, call you in a bit.
You responded on 9/3/2017 at 9:10 a.m. saying, walk me into Cracker Barrel now. Is that right?
Correct.
Tell her, respond again, leaving phone in the car. Is that right?
That was me or her. I don't know. Sure.
Okay. September 9th, 2017 at 3:52 p.m., she sends you a text message, and read that, what she tells you about where she's at.
Sherry and I are on way back. Family cabin in woods. Cell service was bad there. Everything okay.
September 9th, 2017, 4:05 p.m. You text her. What do you say?
Yeah, I tried calling you a couple of times. I got Emily's baby shower invitation. Otherwise, everything's same as usual. Did you have fun?
September 10th, 2017, she texts you. What does she say?
So much fun. No contact with anyone. Read a book. Got some sun. Let you know when we get back. Taking our time driving. Enjoying scenery.
You knew where she was in the sense of being in Minnesota based on what she tells you. Is that right?
Yeah, I don't remember these text messages, but I took her word for it.
You've taken her word on a lot of things, haven't you?
That's all you can do with people, I guess.
So she's never admitted to you that she went for a week or so to Jamaica with Rusty.
No.
Did you know about the credit card that Rusty had given her?
I think after the preliminary hearing, but I'm not 100% sure.
Do you know about the tattoo XO that she had?
I think Ella or Addison had mentioned it, but I personally never saw it.
Did she ever say whether or not that was related to Rusty in any way?
I wouldn't have known.
Did you know that she was with Rusty when she got the tattoo?
I wouldn't have known that either.
You didn't ask her those questions?
Why would I? Ella and Addison told me about it. I didn't get involved.
But on July 5th of 2019, when you watched your prelim, you actually told her that you were taking notes on everything that was said during the prelim, right?
Yeah, it was a lot of information coming at once.
You didn't feel the need to go and confront her and say, why haven't you told me this, or why have you lied to me about this?
I don't know if I did or not. I don't remember. I mean, she was arrested at that point. I just don't remember.
Did you know about her vanishing at times after the murder of your father and going up and seeing Rusty?
There was one time that she had left. Scott and Chris and I all knew about it. And she said to me that she was going to see Martha Jane.
Do you know whether or not she's seeing Martha Jane or seeing Rusty?
I had to take her word for it. I didn't know that she was... I knew she was with Rusty when she got arrested because she called me and said that they had a warrant and she was going in. I had just gotten off work and I was shocked.
When it comes to what you believe and don't believe, we know that you believe your mom is what you testified to, but you don't really believe what your other family members were telling you, right?
No, I think we all have our own opinions, and I think that they deserve to have their own opinion. I never asked them to, from what I recall, to believe her. I just said to give her the benefit of the doubt and let the justice system, let the investigators do their job.
But there were times where, even though it was testified to in the prelim about a bullet, for the longest time, you never wanted to believe. You believed law enforcement was lying to y'all about a bullet being found with your father.
That's what the attorney said.
But
so
you
it was
believed
hard
right?
to. I wouldn't say I didn't know what to believe.
Well, you didn't come out and say, I do believe it. You were saying people, you weren't certain of that, right?
I didn't know what was true.
There's some dates that you were interviewed or gave interviews. There's 4 that I have here. Do you remember giving an interview on Thursday, July 5th of 2018, about 23 minutes with Detective Hayes?
It was July 5th?
Mm-hmm. The day your father was found
Yeah.
at the scene?
I was standing at the fence, and I think he was recording me on like a tape recorder or something, I think.
And do you remember giving an interview on Wednesday, July 11, 2018, with a phone call with Detective Hayes talking about they had frozen some of your money, I think $800 or something. Do you remember calling him about that?
I know that, so when I was in middle school and I got my first checking account, we somehow like opened it under my dad. It wasn't his account. I didn't have access to his account, but somehow, some way, my account was attached, and they shut down all of my financials as well. Well, I say all of my financials, my one checking account.
And then the third interview, Thursday, November 15th, 2018, about 14 minutes long. He actually returned a phone call to Detective Hayes about some air being deflated in y'all's car.
I don't know if I talked to Hayes about it, but my tires went flat on the left side of my car in my driveway.
And then there was a final interview that I have Friday, April the 24th of 2020. It was about 4 hours long. You went and spoke with ADA Zach Smith.
Yeah, I spoke to Zach.
And you went and talked to him, is that right?
Yeah, Zach was a nice guy. He approached me after being here one day. I don't know if it was a preliminary or something, and he kindly asked me, because I was a little upset that nobody wanted to talk to me. I'm like, it made no sense to me that I wasn't talked to, and I was like, you know what, since he asked so nicely, and I think it was a couple of times, and I was like, okay, I'll sit down and talk to you. And we had a good conversation. He was a very nice man. I think one of the detectives was there as well.
I'm going to go through, I got some questions about the first interview. So Thursday, July 5th, 2018. Do you remember you staying that, so that was Thursday, but staying that the night before, your mother called you and said that she was going to the barn to let the goats out or put the goats up or do whatever they do. Do you remember that?
I don't recall.
Would there be any reason that would be, would that be consistent with what your mom would do?
Yes, sir.
It would be?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so she would know and go let the goats out and do stuff like that?
Yeah, especially if Scott wasn't there.
Do you remember your mom saying that she woke up on Thursday when y'all found your dad? Before that, about 8:15, she called you and said she was going to Walmart?
Possibly. I think so. I'm not 100% sure. But that would not shock me to say she went to Walmart.
Now, one of the things with your dad, if he would not be at the house, if he would leave, you knew that he would always take his car and his wallet with him.
That would make sense.
And on the 5th, when law enforcement was there, you described that once the remains were found, you kind of went into full panic mode.
Yes.
So what happened?
I went into shock.
Do you remember your mother telling you that your dad was burning stuff on the burn pile on Tuesday?
That was, yes, because Chris was dropping off Addison or went up there for something, and so he was burning shrubbery and things like that.
In fact, that you had walked by the burn pile on the 5th and it was still hot.
Yes, sir.
Now, as you were looking for your dad, you did go down to the basement, to his office down there, and you found where he had sent an email Tuesday morning at about 8:30. Remember that?
I couldn't get on his computer.
No, you found some paperwork or something down there?
Oh, I don't recall. I just remember trying to tap on his keyboard, but he always had a password on it, and I couldn't.
refresh your memory just to look at something and see if you can remember. This is a not official transcript of your interview, but I'm going to show you something from your interview. This is page 6 for the record. If you would, just read, just to yourself, just those 2 paragraphs.
Which these two?
Yes, ma'am. Just right there will give you the context about that.
Okay.
Do you remember now going down to his office and finding an email?
No.
That morning, you did walk up to the barn and saw the tractor. Is that right?
I really don't remember if I saw the tractor or not. I would assume I did. It's hard to miss.
Do you remember telling law enforcement that's how Mom and Scott knew they did something with the tractor yesterday because the tractor had been moved and the RTV had been moved?
No, sir, I don't remember that.
You still have that same piece of paper there in front of you?
Yes, sir.
Look at the paragraph that says, I was like, well, just read that one to yourself.
No. Uh-huh. Okay.
All right, now, does that refresh your memory that you did say that that's how Mom and Scott, they knew they did something yesterday because the tractor had been moved and our TV had been moved?
Unfortunately not.
Do you remember telling law enforcement that you can tell that, I can tell you that tractor is always parked underneath the same awning if they are not doing something with it?
I knew it was always parked under the same awning.
So that tractor, as far as you knew, if it was not being done, it would be parked under that awning and not out as it was that day on the 5th?
That's where it was normally parked, but I don't know if they were doing something. It could have been very well left out. I wasn't involved in their day-to-day farming activities.
Now, you had a view that sometimes you're Is it not true that sometimes you felt like that your dad saw you as your mother's twin?
She said he would say like you kind of you're I don't know how because I don't see it, but I think that maybe that might have something. He may have said something like that.
And you told law enforcement that thought maybe your dad had a view of trying to get his money.
I don't about me trying to get his money.
That your dad thought you were your mother's twin, maybe trying to get his money.
No, I don't think it in that sense. I think it in the way of like our behavior, I guess, in the sense of I don't really know how to put it, but it didn't have anything to do over money. I never asked him for anything except for my wedding, but he gave me permission for that.
Would it help to refresh your memory, see if it would help to look at another thing?
Sure.
This is page 9 for the record. Just read that to yourself, that top paragraph.
Okay.
So does that refresh your memory that you did say that sometimes he thought of you as your mother's twin, and I guess was
I knew that he thought we looked similar or acted similar, I guess. So I knew he thought we had similarities.
And that essentially you were the only child. You said you were the only child that was not trying to get the money. Is that right?
That's correct.
Because that's how you felt, is that you were the only one not trying to get the money.
Money didn't mean anything to me.
Right, but your dad did provide a lot of help to Scott especially, and Chris and Emily, right?
Yes, because they asked for it,
They relied on him in many ways for finances, right?
unfortunately.
And your dad, when Chad went, he asked your mom and dad for your hand in marriage and went to him and asked him to be married, right?
He did.
That was a happy time for you.
It was.
Yeah, your dad was happy, wasn't
Yes.
he? Yeah. He was happy that Chad was coming to you.
Good Chad's a good man, yeah.
Yeah, and Chad would kind of joke around and kid with your dad because your dad smoked cigarettes and he vaped, so they'd kind of hang out.
Yeah.
And your husband Chad is he's a big guy, right?
I'm not as big as my brothers and my dad,
Yeah.
but he's
He's a tough guy.
6'1".
Yeah, he's a tough guy, isn't he?
He's an alpha male.
Yeah, he is. And he's loyal to you, isn't he?
Yes, he is.
And loves you to death.
I hope so.
Loved your dad.
Yes.
Tried to hang out with him.
Yes.
And in fact, it hurt you when your dad approached you and thought that maybe Chad was doing something with Melody.
Correct.
That really made you angry.
Yes.
But he did come to you and say something to you about that.
He
didn't
called me, and then when I immediately told him that there was no way that could possibly be true, and he was like, "I'm sorry, baby. I'm sorry. I'm sorry," because they would work him up, and then I would talk to him, and he'd be like, "I'm sorry," and we were fine after that.
And your husband, now fiance, back in 2018, had a very close relationship with your mom.
My husband had a normal mother-in-law, father-in-law relationship. He has a very strong sense of family and being with those that you love. And I think that's why I tried to spend so much time with them in the year leading up to this, is because I really wanted to kindle what relationship I could with my parents.
Well, it was attractive how he felt about family, right?
He's a good family man.
But he would talk to your mom and text almost every day.
I wouldn't say every day, but I mean, they had a friend. I talked to my mom every day, so it was about the same as me, I guess.
But he would talk or communicate very often with your mom.
I don't know as very often would be, but I mean, they weren't strangers.
I mean, they're friends.
I guess you could say that.
Enjoyed doing stuff together?
Only if I was there. What do you mean by?
No, I mean with you. He was not opposed to your mom.
Yeah, I mean, it was, me and Chad, and then it was hanging out with my family. So he was very cordial, very polite.
Gets along with your mom.
Yeah.
Not
he
against
didn't
your
want to try to start turmoil or anything.
He's not against your mom even to today, right?
No.
But Scott opposed the marriage a little bit. When he went and asked, Scott was like, "Nah, I don't think this is right. It's too soon."
That's what I heard.
Yeah, that didn't make you feel good either, did it?
It's typical Scott.
One of the things you're talking about with law enforcement is that on July 4th, Emily sent out a group text to everybody, including your dad. Do you remember that?
On July 4th, we were at Lake Lanier, and I don't know who. I know Emily was in it, and I know I was in it because she sent a picture of Olivia, and I sent back a picture of Chad and I at Lake Lanier Islands.
About 2 o'clock on the afternoon, Emily sent out a group text saying Olivia misses everybody or something, says hey or something like that,
I believe
right?
so.
And you thought that was odd because your dad, you said she always sends it out, but he never answered back, and he always answers back, always. Your dad would always answer those group texts.
Unless he was busy doing something, but yeah.
I mean, you use the word always several times. That's just what your dad would do. He would respond to the group text with Emily.
And I don't think he would ignore anybody's text messages, but
And you thought that was strange that he hadn't at that time.
not at that time, no.
But looking back now,
Looking back on it, yes, but there's been moments in our text messages where I would say something and he wouldn't reply back, and he would text me and I wouldn't reply back.
and then when you were talking to Hayes, you talked about that your mother, the issue of his wallet came up, and she said his wallet was in the car. You said your mother said that the wallet was in the car.
I think she said it was in the car. I just remember that at some point. I think she came out with it. It showed up.
And you talked about your dad was a workaholic. He loved to work.
Yes.
And he would be working even all the time.
Yes.
Does it surprise you, or is it shocking to you that during that first conversation you didn't mention anything about the guns with Scott?
What do you mean?
You didn't say anything about guns.
During what conversation? I'm sorry.
With Hayes, Detective Hayes.
I couldn't think straight.
Do you remember saying that you were upset or angry with the sheriff's office because they made y'all wait outside in the hot sun until they talked to you?
That was a long day. It was
It
a
was a long
painful
day.
day.
Very painful day. And they were just trying to figure out what was happening with your dad. So it's a process, right?
As the years have gone, I understand that they had a job to do, and their feelings about our emotions were not at the top of their list.
And from that very first day, you were frustrated with law enforcement, how long they were taking, what they were doing, how they were talking to your mom and things like that. You were just frustrated and irritated with law enforcement.
I think it was a natural sense of being upset with the situation. I think I was angry for many years.
And then on Wednesday, July 11, 2018, do you remember calling Detective Hayes and basically saying that the sheriff's office had improperly frozen your account? That was like $808 or something.
I mean, it was a normal phone call, but I told him that my bank account was frozen because it was somehow tied to my dad's from when I first opened it up. And they asked me to provide like 6 months of records, I think it was. So I pulled them from my Wells Fargo account, and they had it unlocked quickly from what I can't recall. But I had live paychecks at the time. So I just used my husband's money, and then I got my next check. So it wasn't a huge problem.
And then in November 15, 2018, you actually had an incident where someone came up and deflated the tires at your residence in Hall County. Don't give us your address, but it was in Hall County at the time.
Correct.
And you get in touch with Hall County and try to make a report, right?
I think I called 911 because my mother said that she saw somebody running away from the property, I believe.
Right. And your mom said it was a Hispanic male, correct?
I believe so, in like a gray shirt or something.
Right. A gray car maybe, and she had seen him possibly.
I don't know if he had a car, but he was just running.
And you actually had a deputy come out, and your mom says it's the same person that she saw maybe the day before or something. Is that right?
I don't recall that. I had to beg the law enforcement to make a report on it, though.
The law enforcement didn't think there was anything there to make a report on, right?
Correct, but I wanted it documented just in case, because, I mean, that's if somebody's coming on my property where we lived, that was worrisome.
And then you took the next step to actually call Detective Hayes and tell him about the incident. Is that right?
I don't remember.
But you do remember that was during the time that Chris was the temporary administrator. And do you remember saying that you believe Chris is behind the deflating of the tires?
I think I was possibly that one of my brothers could have done it, but I didn't know who. I didn't see the person. I mean, by the time I was taking a shower at the time, by the time I came out, just my car alarm was going off, and that was it.
Right, but you were saying it was Chris. You were blaming Chris for this, right?
I don't know why I would be blaming Chris, but looking back on it, that would have been an unbiased opinion because obviously I didn't know. I was in the shower, so that would be unfair to do that.
And were you talking with your mom? Was it her idea for you to call and make police reports?
I don't remember.
You don't remember?
Either me or her, but I don't. If somebody was on my property, I could see where I would want to call 911 and file a report.
Yeah. But isn't it true your mom just wanted you to make a record or make a case against your brothers while this was going on? So that's why you're doing it?
I don't think she would have necessarily done that. I think things were said from her about my brothers, but like the phone call, like her, talking about Scott threatening her and all this, I just told her, I said, if you don't get a voice audio or a video, nobody's going to believe you. And I left it at that.
You haven't heard the jail calls that we've had between you and your mother, have you?
No.
Do you remember on June 25th, 2019, having a phone call with her where you talked about writing everything down for the attorney? Do you remember talking to her about writing
pertaining
stuff
to
down?
what?
Just writing things down to give to the attorney.
Which attorney? The estate attorney?
Whichever one you were talking about. Do you remember talking about the attorney?
I remember that she was giving me a list for the estate attorney because I had a legal document stating that I could take her personal assets.
Do you remember Chad being on the phone and saying, we're going to do whatever we can to make this shoot go away? He didn't say the word shoot. Make
I was
this
about to
go
say, I
away.
was like, that's something weird. I mean, we were just trying to be positive, and it was a hard time. We were having to go through my parents' house. And
Do you remember saying it's all about the money, 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 money?
everything seemed about money all the time.
And you wanted to make sure that the attorney had all the things he possibly could have?
It was the attorney's responsibility to protect the assets.
And do you remember the conversation there about whether or not Rusty is keeping a check on Chris on Facebook?
No.
Do you remember on June 26th of 2019, another phone call talking about, did Rusty give you a list of things to get out of the house?
I don't recall that. My mother said many things on phone calls, but she gave me a list, and I knew what to get.
But you don't deny that around this time you were talking to Rusty on behalf of your mom?
I really don't recall. There are a lot of times, there was times that she was like, reach out to him, and I did not do it. I didn't want to talk to him.
Do you remember your mom in a phone call on September 6, 2007 saying, does Michael understand the severity of Chris and Scott?
No. But that sounds like something she would say. She was very concerned about Chris and Scott.
How about that we enlightened them? We got the majority of key facts. I got all that to them. Do you remember that conversation all about getting information to the attorneys about Chris and Scott?
No, I assumed that she would have told everything, and I've always been very open and honest about situations with my brothers.
That same phone call, do you remember her instructing you to call Rusty back and talk to him some more?
Probably. She asked me to call him, and I tried to not do that.
On July 5th of 2019, after the prelim and facts came out in the hearing that you didn't know about, you called your mom and talked to her, didn't you?
I would assume so.
Do you remember telling you or saying, let me caution you not to say anything on this phone call?
I said that, or she said that?
She.
I would imagine so. She was always, I knew the phone calls were being recorded, and I didn't have anything to hide, so she would say that. I don't know.
Well, I'm not saying you said that. I'm saying
Yeah,
she said.
possibly. I would assume so. I would assume her attorneys advised her.
Do you remember after learning new information, including he's in the burn pile by Rusty, that phone call, do you remember telling your mom that you have a few questions for people?
Yeah, that was a very concerning piece of information. And
But
that's the phone call to Rusty when I had to go get the dogs. And I had talked to him on the phone. I said, did she say this? And he said no.
And then other phone calls, you keep talking about you still stand where you've always stood with your mom. In other words, you still believe that she didn't commit the murder. Remember saying things like that?
I was definitely far more like, I believe everything of my mother. I understand now that this is not my spot to investigate this, and there's no way for me to know everything. Just like Zach told me, y'all have all of the information. It's very hard for me to form opinions, and when I just don't know.
Did you know that your mother said to Rusty, if you don't stop talking, you're going to single-handedly hang me?
No, I don't believe so, unless that was in a preliminary hearing.
Did she ever say anything to you about be careful on the phones?
She always did, but I didn't have anything to be careful about.
Did she ever ask you to be quiet or shh, don't talk about things?
Yeah, but then she would go on and she would ramble and ramble and ramble about things after that.
You agree with me that this whole ordeal is just awful for you, right?
Traumatizing.
And it does upset you, doesn't it?
Very much.
And you have strong feelings both directions in this case. Is that fair?
I stand right in the middle, and I pray y'all can do your job and figure out what happened.
And you just want the facts, the jury to hear all the facts and make their decision based on the facts and the truth in this case?
Absolutely.
You agree with me that you do have an interest in the outcome of this case, though, right?
How would I have an interest?
I mean, your mother, you don't want anything to happen to your mother, right?
I would hate to see her go to jail, prison. Nobody wants to see their mother in that situation. But if she had something to do with this, then that's where people go who have done things like that.
You agree that we have to, in cases like this, we really have to put the emotion aside and just follow the evidence?
And that's why I cannot do your job.
Would you agree, though, that when you're following the evidence, you have to include and consider everything, including things like the motive, if someone has a motive?
I guess, but I think it would fall down to opinion, possibly.
You agree, though, motive is what prompts the heart to do something, though, right?
I guess so. If you don't have a moral compass or a sense of a relationship with God, then I guess so.
You'd have to consider the means, the ability to do this, right?
Repeat that?
You'd have to consider the fact someone's means or ability to do this crime, right?
Yeah, I guess you would boil it down to sheer physics of it all.
Yeah, and when you boil it down, you have to consider who had the opportunity, who was there at the time that this took place.
Yes.
You can't just say Scott did it, Chris did it, she did it. I mean, that's kind of inconsistent. That's kind of like throwing spaghetti against the wall. You just have to boil it down to what the evidence speaks of, right?
That's correct.
You also have to consider who was present on the property in July 3rd at the time that the murder took place. Who was there and who was not there, right?
I would assume so.
You'd have to also consider phone records in this case, wouldn't you?
All evidence is evidence.
And you don't know those phone records, do you?
No.
You don't know the GPS evidence in this case, do you?
No.
You don't know the geofencing evidence that shows who and only whose phone is on the property at the time and after the death of your father.
No.
You'd have to consider that, though,
Oh,
wouldn't you?
yes, you would have. I mean, hopefully everything available.
I mean,
I've
you
seen
would.
other trials where they've used more than that, like the Marital trials, and that was mind-blowing. But I think that any bit of information helps.
And you'd have to consider phone calls between your mom and a lover, right?
Yes.
You'd have to consider all the statements that have been made in the case by your mom and other people, correct?
Yes, I do not pity any of, I mean, not pity, but I do not want to be in your shoes.
I mean, you'd have to consider, even if you rejected it, and even if she says, I didn't say that, or she didn't say that, you still have to consider Rusty's statement that she told me he's in the burn pile. You'd have to consider it, wouldn't you?
You have to consider everything, I guess.
And part of that is you'd have to consider the context that when he made that statement about he's in the burn pile, the rest of the statement that I said, do not say another word and do not tell me anything, I do not need to know, that is attached to the statement. You'd have to consider it in totality, wouldn't you?
I would assume so.
Right, so if the statement was tried to be explained later on, like he just overheard something being said with Martha Jane, you still have to consider, why would you say don't tell me anything else? Because it comes down to credibility in many ways, doesn't it?
You have to consider everything.
Did you know your mom had a text message one time about your dad says, I hope you die alone in a gruesome death?
No.
You'd have to consider that too, wouldn't you?
Evidence is evidence.
Do you know of the statement about your mom with Rusty talking about being on the same page, and I can tell you that there should not have been as much damage as there was done? Would you know why she would say that?
No.
You know about the statement that she said that that body should not have been burned up?
What do you mean?
Do you know whether or not she's even said that the statement that
I
that
don't
body
know.
should not have been burned
I've
up?
never heard anything directly, so no.
If she said those statements to Rusty on a phone call, you would have to consider that. You have to consider that in trying to decide for yourself whether or not you do or don't believe that she committed the murder.
I personally, I mean, evidence is evidence. The truth is the truth.
If someone intentionally commits a murder and burns a body, and they're not crazy, they would be conscious of what they did, right?
I would assume so.
As you would have to consider in this case, and you yourself would consider, if there's a lot of lies and deceptions, wouldn't you agree with me that that speaks to the guilty mindset of the person that did it?
I don't know.
And you don't know, Amanda, because you don't want to believe your mom committed this murder, right?
I don't want to believe my mother would ever do anything like that. I don't want to believe anybody would do something like that.
I have nothing further, Judge.
Swear.
Briefly, Judge. Your mother and Chad did not have an affair.
No.
And you said something to the effect of they would work him up. Was that Chris?
My brothers would always try to stir stuff up.
So that's
Always.
where that idea came from.
Yes.
Okay.
Because I told my parents he had a drinking problem and he was mad, and that was his retaliation. In
You
my
agree
eyes.
that's very cruel. That's a cruel thing that your
My brother has said and done things in the past years since this has happened that are very cruel, that are unforgivable almost. But as a Christian, I have to forgive him and understand it was the alcohol.
Your mother has lived with you now for about 4 years.
Yes.
And in those 4 years, she has never admitted to anything, has she?
Never.
And she has always maintained her innocence?
Correct. We've had some serious conversations, and the story remains the same.
You mentioned, it sounded like you were kind of trying to do your own investigation into this case 6 years ago. Is that kind of what it...
At the beginning,
Right.
and then I lost. You can't do anything when you don't know anything. And I grew up, and I understand that I can't control everything, and God's will is God's way. And that's it.
But also, is it fair to say that you felt like nobody was questioning you, asking you what happened?
Nobody wanted to talk to me.
Until somebody who used to be in the district attorney's office spent 4 hours with you.
Yeah, he came out of his way to come up to Hall County to talk to me and my husband.
And you felt like you were finally heard
Yes.
years after this incident took place.
That was in 2020. I was pregnant with my son, yeah.
Until now. This is really your first chance to finally be heard in front of this jury.
Yes.
Do you feel like you've said everything you needed to say?
There's just so much pain. There's no good outcome. He's never coming back. He'll never be there again. And that's just the worst part about it all. And knowing that my mother could potentially spend the rest of her life in prison is terrifying. But again, everybody, you have to follow the evidence, and you have to do what you do. And I'm sorry, y'all have to do this. I'm sorry.
Going back to that investigation that you were doing, essentially, too, after you heard what you heard in the prelim, and now this jury has heard those recordings that the district attorney was talking to you about, you questioned Rusty.
Yes.
Adamantly.
Yeah.
I believe you used the words he was a coward,
He is a coward.
and that he was just trying to essentially cover for himself. He was only about himself. Did you say something like that?
Correct.
But when you confronted him, he literally told you he lied.
He just said that she didn't say that. That's all I know. That's from what I can recall, because that's the only conversation I really remember ever having with him. And I blatantly asked him, "Did she say this?" And he said no.
Did he go into any detail as to why?
No, but I probably didn't dig into it. I have a terrible way of not being involved.
Okay. The statement, Mr. Fogus read off to you a number of statements and things that have been presented in this trial, but I just want to get to this one and see if you knew anything about it, since you were around in the Manny Aurora investigation, which he had kind of his own investigators that went out to the house, right? Were you there for any of that?
I was.
All right, so this statement, I think he read out something about her talking to Rusty about the body wasn't meant to be burned that bad, but there were fire investigators that y'all had hired to go out to the property.
Manny had hired somebody to go out there.
And that information came from that investigator. Were you around for that?
I don't know if I ever heard any of the outcome of it. I just knew that he had hired certain people to go out there, but I don't know how far it went, because he only had received so much money, and we couldn't afford to pay him.
Okay. Before I said, is there anything else you want to say to this jury?
I'm sorry that you have to be here. I'm sorry I have to be here and everybody in this room. But it's just, if I can say anything at all, and what this has taught me is that lean into God, and He will take care of you and give you peace and calm in the storm, and just give you a sense of hope. And I don't know, it's hard to find anything.